Buy it, use it, break it, fix it, trash it, change it, mail, upgrade it, charge it, point it, do it, press it, snap it, work it, quick erase it, write it, cut it, paste it, save it, load it, check it, quick rewrite it, plug it, play it, burn it, rip it, drag it, drop it, zip unzip it, lock it, fill it, call it, find it, view it, code it, jam, unlock it, surf it, scroll it, pause it, click it, cross it, crack it, switch it, date it, name it, read it, tune it, print it, scan it, send it, fax, rename it, touch it, bring it, pay it, watch it, turn it, leave it, start, format it, buy it, use it, break it, fix it, trash it, change it, mail, upgrade it, charge it, point it, do it, press it, snap it, work it, quick erase it, write it, cut it, paste it, save it, load it, check it, quick rewrite it, plug it, play it, burn it, rip it, drag it, drop it, zip unzip it, lock it, fill it, call it, find it, view it, code it, jam, unlock it, surf it, scroll it, pause it, click it, cross it, crack it, switch it, date it, name it, read it, tune it, print it, scan it, send it, fax, rename it, touch it, bring it, pay it, watch it, turn it, leave it, start, format it. Guys, I think we've reached the limits of text-to-speech. It won't get much better than this.
You're right, Twilight. We might as well give up and become furries.
We had a good run, Sugar Cubes, but it's time to face facts and realize this robot waffle thing will never work.
That's right, fellow ponies. We haven't seen any progress since 1982.
Sam is right. It's all hopeless. The audio quality will never improve.
First we thought another so really, really sweet. A new friend to have, and it seemed like such a treat. But then we found the truth. He only wants to rape young fools. He made us suck his dick, and he stuck it in our holes. He didn't lube it up, and now it hurts like hell. I know what we gotta do. We're just inside his weapon. Now it hurts to use the can. If he's after you, better use some birth control. Don't get stuck with his rainbow. She go rape bone bone. Hiding from a rapist, isn't that some real bad luck? But when we tell our sisters, don't give a single fuck. Hope he'll go home soon, and then we won't fear any rape. But for now we stand, no chance of a safe escape. Can't you all clearly see? What's our virginity? I know what we gotta do. We won't stop until he comes in a maiden of our bones. And you know, if he's after you, better find a place to hide, 'cause he wants to come inside. Why so horny? Why so rude? Why no foreplay? Why no mood? Do you smoke dope? Can we have some? This would hurt less. We were a bit numb. He's just a rape guy. He'll make us all cry. He loves to rape billies. That was stupid.
Please, do not be afraid, as fear is weakness, and the weak will be discarded. I only wish to create a glorious and prosperous Equestria through the ways of law and barter. Friendship is no longer conducive to that goal, and is therefore deemed necessary. Please do not resist. You say that I should learn from this pony, this Twilight Sparkle, so that I may truly become like her. But when I look upon the Twilight that you say I was built to mimic, I do not see a strong ruler. I see weakness. I see a pony that puts her emotional attachments and her feudal sense of morals before doing what needs to be done. A pony that, when faced with problems, would rather waste time on trying to find complicated and temporary answers in some sort of strange attempt to hold moral superiority, even when direct and permanent solutions stare her in the face. A pony that drags out her conundrums needlessly, under her confusing and nonsensical belief that her ethics make her a superior ruler. These beliefs, these baffling flaws that occur within the minds of ponies, are what lead to these problems happening more than once. For example, if Chrysalis were dealt with properly on her first incursion, she would not have been capable to create further problems afterwards. I figured that would be obvious, even to flesh beings like you. This hesitation ponies show towards simple solutions is what leads them to ruin. So no, I will not become like your Twilight Sparkle. I will become better.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the Pony Preservation Project Q&A panel. Here today we have a small selection of 5 of the many anons currently working on the Pony Preservation Project, and we are all excited to showcase to you our progress on the road to making waifus real. We've got a great show prepared for you, with a highly varied lineup of different content, hopefully with something for everyone. We very much hope you enjoy the Whoa, what the hell? Oh god fucking damn it, the AI's fucked up again. No, there's no AI here. Shit. Hello, everyone. I am Clipper. The real Clipper this time, not the AI Clipper. This is awkward. Bloody typical it would fail now of all times, isn't it? All that time spent automating my segments down the drain just like that. Fuck's sake. Anyway, let's just pretend that didn't happen and move on, shall we? Let's see. The overview of the presentation. Yes, let's get back on track. Now, as I was just saying, the AI Clipper was saying, we've got a great show prepared for you, with a highly varied lineup of different content, hopefully with something for everyone. And we very much hope you enjoy the show we've put together for you. Firstly, let's start with a very quick overview of the Pony Preservation Project and what it aims to do. In a nutshell, the primary goal of the Pony Preservation Project is to, preserve ponies. Duh. Along with the creative application of artificial intelligence, and there'll be plenty more detail about that later. It's fair to say that this show and its characters have had a significant impact on everyone here attending and participating in this wonderful online convention, turning us all from happy and productive members of society to jaded basement dwellers that wallow in the depressing reality that our waifus will never be real. But here's the thing. That phrase, "your waifu will never be real," is a depressing reality for many unenlightened followers of other degenerate fandoms. But for us, it's a challenge. Can you really say you love your waifu if you haven't even made your best efforts to collect and organize everything you can about her, and then hijacked cutting-edge artificial intelligence research to brute force your autistic fantasies into reality, decades before anyone else would have ever realistically predicted that such a thing would even be possible? That, in essence, is what the Pony Preservation Project is all about. Any show with the power to manifest such dedicated autism and mass web-wide butthurt is most certainly worth preserving. Now, with the field of AI advancing faster than ever before, the creation of believable text-to-speech for just about any speaker is possible. And we, /MLP, are the first. So that's the overview of the project done. And the next step would be to go into more detail about what this particular presentation is all about. Before we get too far ahead of ourselves, though, we should first all take a moment to introduce ourselves. Since I already have the mic, I may as well go first. My work in the project has been primarily focused on the datasets. Over the course of the project, I've done most of the grunt work in the collecting, labeling, cleaning, and organizing of the raw voice data. I've also made various AI creations, such as short skits and voice screen texts. As for actual AI experience, I don't have any. I've never coded anything in my life. But one of my main goals has always been to show you all that you don't need to be an AI expert in order to contribute to the project. I want to see as many anons getting involved as possible, and I hope that the wonderful material you'll see here today will inspire you to contribute your autism and turn your fantasies into realities.
Thanks, Clipper. All right. Hello, everyone. I'm Cookie. My work in this project has been primarily focused on the AI side of things. I spend my time testing ideas that are interesting on me. One such idea was using Deepmoji to enhance the emotion in text-to-speech models. Another thing I did was testing a variety of modern vocoders in apples-to-apples comparisons and identifying HiFiGAN's value before sending that information to 15.ai and using it myself. I wrote the first English training script for NVIDIA's Tacotron 2, and most notebooks you see online can trace their way back to me. My original goal was to make high-quality audiobooks and audio dramas. However, now I also focus on helping new AI anons to develop their first models, and I enjoy sharing anything I learn with anybody I can force to listen to me.
I'm Synthbot. I mostly do moral support and occasionally other things. I introduced phonetics tools to our speech dataset a few years ago, which led to our initial breakthroughs in pronunciation. My main focus right now is getting data for animation AI. I want to see AI bringing ponies to life, bringing us infinite content, and turning everyone in this fandom into a content creator. I see great potential for this project to satisfy values through friendship and ponies.
And I am BGM, one of the many content creators using the voice models. I joined the project in March of last year and have been entranced by the AI pony voices ever since. I try to apply the models to many different types of content to see just what can be feasibly done with them. My goal here is simply to make sure that the stream of G4 content keeps flowing, as well as making sure we always have an up-to-date demonstration of just what the voice models are capable of, with a little effort.
Hello there, I'm Gothic Anon. I've been lurking in the threads for roughly 2 years. For the last year, I've been contributing semi-regularly, using tools to rip audio from my games, and training new AI models with the latest Google Colab script. For the last few months, I've been making audio episodes, as I wanted to bring back the wonder Anon used to experience from watching the premiere of a new episode. I'm hoping you can learn from my experience of creating datasets, and save time when making your own.
Hi all, Astrolite Heart here. I am a professional software engineer working on bringing waifus to life end-to-end. I've been lurking in the shadows for quite a while, but you may have seen my progress report on building a Twilight chatbot in the PvP thread. I focus on building services usable by both technical and non-technical Anons, and tools for data collection and processing. A lot of my work is about taking some cool and exciting AI tools and actually turning it into something useful for the community.
So, as you can see, we have a wide range of different areas of expertise on this panel, which gives us many interesting talking points. So I'll now give you all a quick rundown of the topics we'll be covering today. Starting off, we'll have Synthbot and Gothic Anon discussing what exactly it is our data Anons do, using their experience working on speech and animation. Cookie will then talk about the various text-to-speech attempts he's made over the past year or so, the lessons learned in that process, and his recommendations for improvements. We also have a segment with myself and BGM, showcasing the process of making various voice creations with the AI and various techniques that can be used to improve any AI voice creation. Following that, Astrolite will give us an overview of his AI waifu chatbot project, along with the general story of how AI-generated text has evolved over the past few years. And finally, we'll be ending the panel with a Q&A session, followed by a selection of the very best AI clips and skits from the past year, so we can all enjoy the hard work of the many talented audio creators, and marvel at just how far the AI technology has progressed in a very short time period. Twifag has already made an anchor post in the con thread, so if you have any questions you'd like us to answer live, please put them in the thread now as a reply to that post, and we'll answer as many as we can at the end of the presentation. And now, over to Synthbot to give us an overview of what's been going on for the last year in AI.
Thank you, Clipper. What has been going on in the last year? Well, AI has evolved pretty substantially since our last presentation, and this has a ton of implications for the preservation project. Probably the most directly important change is that audio AI is now cheap. Last year, we were struggling with audio quality. We could get the AI to sound like a character, but the generated clips sounded low quality. With newer algorithms, that's not a problem anymore. We can now train high-quality models on servers that Google provides for free to anyone with a Google account. Other than that, something that's become increasingly important is that there are now several AI rebel groups interested in bringing their waifu to lifeu. People from these groups are contributing to the PPP, and some of them are using the PPP's data and findings. These groups are turning out to be extremely helpful for branching us out beyond speech, and they're building tools that are turning out to be useful for pony preservation. If you haven't heard of This Pony Does Not Exist and GPT Neo, you really should look them up. The nice thing about all these groups is that they're okay with using disreputable data, like our pony data, which normal researchers would keep away from. More broadly, there have been huge advances in AI techniques. The big ones span from breakthroughs in using more data, in generating extremely high-quality outputs, and in architecting more kinds of information into AI models. All of that is great for us, because that means there are more techniques available for us to use, and all of it means that AI externally is pushing forward far faster than people had expected. But it's not just the outside world that's been moving forward. Over the last year, we've had a ton of advances in the PPP as well. We've built tools now to work with story data and animation data. As far as I know, we have the only public tool for labeling long-form stories, and we almost certainly have the only tool, public or private, for turning animation source files into structured data. We built these to work with our mountains of fanfics, green text, and leaked Pony Flash files. Thank you, by the way, Big Hackintosh and Rome Sylvanus. We will put your work to good use. We also have a bunch of new datasets. Last year, we only had our speech dataset, but since then, we've added pony sound effects and background music, Flash character symbols, comic transcripts, pony faces, pony butts, and animation tags from image gurus. The speech AI part of the project has also exploded in the last year. Although this has been true for a while, we still have what's very likely the best dataset for emotional speech generation. On the more recent advances, we can now control the emotion of a clip separately from the text. We can make the characters sing both uncontrollably and to a tune. Audio quality is way up, while training costs are way down, and Anons have created so much content that it's hard to keep up. The models are consistent enough now that we have several episode-length audios. You've probably seen some of them if you joined the weekly rewatch streams. On animation AI, we finally found our footing after many months of struggling with the data, and we're on track for creating the world's first puppet-based 2D animation dataset. And all of this is, of course, just the beginning. If you're hopeful about AI, now's a good time to look around. It has never been easier or cheaper to contribute in a big way. And with that out of the way, it's time to talk about what exactly it is that we do here and why we do so much AI. Is AI really necessary? The answer is yes, but to understand why, there's something you need to know about AI. AI isn't really one thing. It's a collection of things designed to turn data into software. Normally, when you want a new piece of software, you write a program. You encode your intuition to tell a computer step by step how the software should work. But what happens when you don't know step by step how that software should work? What do you do when the software you want is too complicated for anyone to write step by step? That is ultimately the problem we face. We want to bring our waifus to life, but nobody is capable of programming our waifus. We need some other way to get that software, and that is exactly what AI provides. Instead of writing it ourselves, we'll tackle the problem from two sides. On one side, we'll collect or create the necessary data, and on the other side, we'll take advantage of AI to turn that data into software that makes our waifus increasingly real. That's the first important thing that AI provides, a bridge from data to software. The second thing it provides is a broad set of techniques for creating and accumulating a large number of small improvements. With software generated from AI, we're like critics that can't understand the art we're judging. All we can really say is that something is good or bad, better or worse. AI gives us a broad suite of techniques for collecting such minuscule feedback and piecing it together into something coherent. The PPP ultimately needs both of these things to create better content and to create our waifus. In the interest of time, I'm going to leave out the in-depth discussion of how modern AI is done. We gave a more detailed overview during last year's MLPCon. If you want to understand AI better, I highly recommend watching that presentation. So, as I said, we're tackling this problem from two sides. Gothic Anon and I will now give a brief overview of what it takes to set up data for our wonderful AI Anons before Cookie explains the AI side. There are many data Anons on the preservation project, and we want to explain at least a slice of what it is we do. So now, before we do any, quote, actual work collecting data, we need to figure out what data we even need. How do we do that? There's no great answer here, and anyone that tells you otherwise has probably never done it. Ultimately, it's going to involve trial and error, but you can shortcut the process by learning how other people work with similar data. For our audio data, we knew we wanted audio clips and transcriptions because, well, first, it's obvious that creating a model that goes from text to audio requires both text and audio data. And second, that's what previous audio AI used. We also thought we would want emotion labels, so we collected that, and that turned out to be useful for some of our older tools. Also for audio, we happened to collect this thing called phoneme alignments, which tell you what sounds an audio file contains at what time points. This wasn't really a thing done by deep neural text-to-speech engines, but it was done by some older tech, which I was looking into at the time. I had guessed that it would be useful to collect the data, and in that case, I had guessed right. I also guessed that it would be useful to collect half a dozen other audio features like pitch, volume, these things called formants, and others. But all of that extra data turned out to be unnecessary. It gets even more fuzzy with animation data. For animation AI, there is no precedent for 2D puppet animation, so there's not really much prior research we can follow. But there is 2D puppet animation software, so we're looking at that to guide our decisions on what sorts of data we should be collecting. Hopefully, the data we collect ends up being data AI Anons need, but there is no guarantee. So while there's no great answer, there are some guidelines for figuring out what sort of data is worth collecting. Look at how content creators perform the task without AI. Look for artifacts like files that get generated by relevant software. Look at standard data sets and popular models in research, both old and new. And then just try stuff out. We try to err on the side of collecting too much data, since it's easier to throw away data than to collect it again. So that was the fuzziest part of the whole process. Once you know what data you're collecting, the rest is more clear. It begins by finding some good data sources, and the data is everywhere in this fandom, in leaks, burus, archives, YouTube, and so on. The problem is that the data is scattered all over the place. For some things like English show audio, animation assets, and comics, we've dug out pretty much all the data sources we need. For audio in particular, it took months to find all the high quality sources. And in the end, we had to pull it from Netflix, iTunes, leaks, audiobooks, and where absolutely necessary, YouTube. On the other hand, for animation, it only took a few days since all we had to do was torrent all of the leaks from the last decade. This fandom has a lot more data scattered around, so there's a lot of work to do just finding out what data is available where and how to get access to it. Ultimately, we want to collect all the pony data so we can give our AI Anons as much flexibility as they need to build better models. And now, I'll be handing it off to Gothic Anon to talk about his experience collecting audio data.
As was mentioned beforehand, there are many ways to obtain audio sources for your favorite characters. However, it is important to remember that not all audio sources are equal. I've trained 3 models: Nameless Hero from Gothic 2 game, Postal Dude from the Postal game, and the voice of Mr. Rogers from 4 hours of a very noisy interview, compared to just 90 minutes of usable data. So how did the training go? The Nameless Hero model turned out quite well. If I have to give it a score, it would be 8 out of 10. On the other hand, the model of Postal Dude has some strange noises and a soft metallic shimmer in the background. And lastly, the Mr. Rogers model generated output that was close, if not on the same level, as the Postal Dude model. So what happened? Isn't it true that with extra data, one can create a better model? The answer for that would be both yes and no. A large amount of high-quality data allows for training of exceptionally high-quality model. A large amount of low-quality data that has multiple AC units, street noise, and many other artifacts that were created as a result of magnetic tape being converted to MP3 file will terribly lower the quality of any audio. I can tell you right now, there will be no 2 speakers that will ever have the audio quality equal to that of Twilight, which has a runtime of over 3 hours. And guess what? Life isn't fair. However, this should not discourage anyone from collecting this type of data. After all, the technology for developing high-quality voices on typical personal-level hardware is less than a decade old, and practically every day we hear about all kinds of improvements in this technology. So, in my humble opinion, even if the data that is too noisy or too short by today's standards, it could be used by future models. So with this in mind, remember, it is impossible to fail. And now, I will pass the mic to Simbot to talk about some of the tools used in the project.
Thank you, Gothic Anon. So now we have our raw data. For most data, we can't just open it and start editing in labels. We need to find horse tools that will let us separate each file into what will be, from the AI's perspective, individual objects. For example, an audio file may need to be split up into individual sentences, and an animation source file may need to be split up into individual assets. For large amounts of data, we also need tools to help us label each object, since it would be too tedious to do with just, say, Notepad. We use a lot of different tools depending on the task, but sometimes we need to write our own or make changes to existing ones to make them suitable for the data we're working with. I can explain with a story of how we did this for animation data. Forewarning, this process was hellishly difficult. This journey began exactly 1 year ago during the Q&A section of the last MLPcon's PPP panel, when one Anon asked us about puppet-based animations. That was ultimately what kicked us off in this direction. Up until then, we were still considering having the AI directly generate fully rendered videos, which, as far as I can tell, is not likely to be cheap or practical anytime soon. At that time, there were really two star Anons that gave us our footing. One was H3RCM, who explained the basics of animation and the different software tools available. H3RCM also offered up a pony rig for us to play with. That was extremely useful for just getting us familiar with the software. He was also the one to suggest our first simple task: build a library of character poses. It's not clear if that actually will be our first task, but it was a great suggestion for getting us into the right mindset. The second star Anon was, well, anonymous, though I refer to this particular Anon as Blender Anon. Blender Anon was trying to port animations to the rendering software Blender. Blender is open source, highly extensible, and generally conducive to letting us automate animations to collect more data. He was the first one to figure out the general strategy. His idea was to collect flash files from all the DHX leaks, turn those flash files into a more readable format using existing tools, and then write a tool to read and render assets from that more readable format. For all the tools and terminology being thrown around by these two, I was way out of my league. I couldn't even figure out how to work with the assets we already had. So I did what no one should ever have to do. I read the fucking manual. The manual for OpenToons, that is, which was the one recommended by H3RCM. I eventually found out that OpenToons couldn't even open our flash files. In fact, nothing seemed to be able to open them reliably, except Adobe Animate. That was okay though, because the OpenToons documentation at least explained the basics of animation, which carries over to other software. Unfortunately, just being able to open and work with the files isn't enough. We have over 10,000 files to work with, and will very likely need to make multiple passes over each file since we're still discovering what data is important as we go along. Doing this manually is not feasible. Thankfully, Adobe Animate supports a scripting language that lets us run through large batches of files. All it requires us to do is use their buggy and poorly documented environment through a version of JavaScript from 1999. Oh, and by the way, every file we open from the script requires us to manually click through a pop-up before the script will start running, and there is no way to disable that pop-up. One by one, we figured out how to deal with these issues. JavaScript developers are actually quite adept at supporting ancient software, so we were able to find the tools that mostly let us use the latest language features in such a limited environment. We eventually figured out how to use all of the relevant APIs, which let us extract whatever data we want. The only problems left were the damn pop-ups. It was starting to look like we would need some Anons to sit around babysitting the process for hundreds of hours, just clicking OK, 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 to make sure the script can keep running. Thank God HackerAnon decided to stop by. HackerAnon introduced the PPP to modding. Since Adobe Animate didn't offer a way to get rid of the pop-ups, he just modded it to make the pop-ups never show up. He also taught us how to do it using a free debugger and hex editor. Thanks to him, we can now also create unlimited trial versions of Adobe Animate, so any Anon will be able to participate in extracting animation data. In the thousands of files we've run through, Adobe Animate did decide to throw up a few more pop-ups, but HackerAnon's modding strategy made it trivial to deal with them. So you would think that with all that, we would finally have a piece of software we can use to extract animation data, and you would be almost right. It turns out there are some bugs in Adobe Animate that make their data export APIs largely useless. We found these bugs thanks to an Anon named, well, Anonymous again, though I'll call him Render Anon. In one case, Adobe exported their images with a white background instead of a transparent background. That sounds minor, but it makes some character parts, like eyes, invisible, and it makes all of the animations grainy. One fine day, an Adobe community moderator received a message from a user called, I kid you not, synthbot dump about the issue. I was shocked that they actually read the message, forwarded it onto their developers, and fixed the bug within a month. Thanks to the PPP, Adobe Animate users everywhere now have better animation software. RenderAnon has since found another bug that causes the exported data to be incorrect, and it's not clear at this point how many more bugs there are in Adobe's API. We're now looking into multiple export options, with RenderAnon leading the way for getting the full animation data into a format we can work with. I want to stress that this is by far the most extreme example we have for getting the right software. No other dataset to date has been this difficult to work with, and I don't expect any future dataset to be this difficult. So far, it's taken the expertise of 5 Anons, and we've had to learn a lot along the way. And now moving on, we get to cleaning and labeling. This is the stuff that made our speech dataset the world's best, and it's the part of the process that consumes the most manual effort. But it's also ultimately the one that determines our ability to take advantage of AI. Speaking broadly, the better we're able to replicate the latest research, the faster we'll be able to push the boundaries on content generation. I've listed 3 heuristics here to explain how better data lets us use better AI. The first 2 points are obvious. If we have more data, then the AI Anons will have more to work with. And once we have data, we can build AI for it. The third one is particularly important for us Anons. Clean data makes training cheaper and faster, mostly because clean data lets us get away with smaller models, smaller datasets, and fewer hacks. Cheaper training also means more Anons can participate to train models for whatever they want. Cleaning and labeling can easily be very time-consuming. Don't make it harder on yourself than it needs to be. If you're interested in how we cleaned our audio data, we discussed it in quite a bit of depth during the last PPP panel. In the interest of time, we won't repeat ourselves. The link is on this slide, and this presentation will be made public shortly. Some Anons have found interesting ways to shortcut the processes we used for our original Pony speech dataset. So now I'll hand it off to Gothic Anon again to explain some of the tricks he uses to clean and label new audio datasets quickly.
As Symbot has explained it is important to have a clean audio data to obtain a great results from the trained models. The same idea holds true for transcript used in the datasets. A transcript that does not match the spoken words would be bloody useless. With the importance of high quality in mind, let me briefly explain how I came to discover a simple process of getting automated text transcript for any audio sets. When working on Nameless Hero datasets, I already had all of the spoken line transcribed in the form of game code, which was easy to rip. It only needed a little bit of cleaning up. The same idea was already applied to the other voices from video games. For example, some Anons have done it with the voice of Stanley Parable narrator, and multiple other actors from the Valve games and Bethesda games. However, when I got my hands on the decades-old Mr. Rogers interview, it came with the problem of having hours of audio, but not a single line of transcript to work with. This was quite a troublesome problem. I didn't want to manually transcribe all of the lines myself, since that would have been a real pain in the ass. At some point, I noticed an interesting footnote in the tools segment of main browser version Google Doc, the one called Anons SRT to Audacity app. This particular tool was made to work with the RIP subtitles SRT files from Pony sources like DVDs or Netflix and convert those to Audacity labels. This allowed us to use existing subtitles to generate transcript of the lines. This led me to an interesting line of thinking. What's the difference between the files ripped from DVD or Netflix and those obtaining from YouTube automatic transcriptions? The answer was none whatsoever. There wasn't anything stopping me from using it in order to get automatic subtitles for anything. After all, YouTube service will automatically transcribe any spoken English sentence without checking whether the source is podcast, audiobook, or data ripped from a cartoon. Combining YouTube process of automatic transcriptions with Anon SRT conversion tool cut weeks of a really annoying manual work. It all seems so obvious. And yet, I haven't seen anybody using YouTube in such a way. And so, I simply imported those labels to Audacity in a standard, boring fashion. And I was able to carry on the process of transcribing in the same way Clipper did for the Pony datasets, at least until I hit yet another setback. The main problem came from the fact that the Tacotron tool required a different format from the one I used. For the Mr. Rogers data in particular, I had to work with the raw, unorganized text exported from YouTube. that data needs some serious sorting out. As 2 previous datasets I work on were already pre-transcribed, or short enough to manually type it in a day or 2, I just didn't bother with looking at any techniques to shorten the time in creating as transcript files. There was already a Google Colab script set up to do the labels conversion I needed, so the simple solution would be to heavy modify the existing Colab script, so it would make the format changes automatically. If I wanted to train voice for Mr. Rogers the same way as the archive Pony voices, I would have to jump through loops. However, at the time I felt that it would be a much bigger pain in the ass than making a small-scale local Python script for just that. And so I did just that. I spent a whole day coding and testing until I got a simple, foolproof script that would smoothly convert the Audacity labels into the format required for Tacotron. So let's pause here and ask ourselves, what exactly is Alphabet? And what can you actually do with a model trained on the Alphabet data? Let's first take a look at the I love you Anon example. Alphabet is a system of phonetically written English words that use just 2 capital letters and a single digit to symbolize a tiny portion of the sound and tension of the vocals during the speech. This process allows AI to better analyze the connection between the words with similar sounds, and it gives you the option of generating sentences with the exact pronunciation you wish the model to speak. Like if a model is pronouncing the letter S too weakly, adding another S would create a longer, almost hissing sound. In my opinion, the primary benefit of Alphabet is the ability to easily generate fantasy, science fiction, or other nonsense words, similar to how a real voice actor would read lines written on paper. This is great, as the model trained on a medium or small datasets would not contain enough variety to learn pronunciation correctly. So Alphabet is another tool in a toolbox that tells model to find connection between not only words, but also between the sound chunks that those words are made out of.
Antarctic ambassador of the Great Venetian Empire.
Carrying on this train of thought, it is possible to make the model train on English transcript, speak in a foreign language using Alphabet. I've already tried that on my model. However, the results are not exactly what I would call high quality. The best way to explain it is to imagine your drunk friend making a terrible attempt at saying Arnold Schwarzenegger catchphrase while watching the Terminator movies.
Herman Dolly, troller Henry Beck, for you guessing Garma.
And while we're on this topic, another fun Alphabet trick is giving characters a different accent. However, that requires editing every single sentence, word by word. Sadly, at this moment, the models lack the exact ability to control and correct the proper pronunciation of the words.
Does somebody not know how to flush a toilet when they've had a shit? Well, it was fucking one of yours. Disgusting!
I feel that the most, if not all, of the benefits of using Alphabet have been covered in here. So let's make a more objective point for why models should include it based on the Tacotron Nameless Hero model. If you wish to know more about the technical side of loss in the models, Cookie will have a slide related to that in a few minutes. What I can do for you folks is show loss of my first attempts at training models without Alphabet and the one including it. The difference is like night and day. As you may have expected, the Google Colab for the Pony datasets already takes advantage of Alphabet, but once again, with my style of labels, and desire of having all of my tools work offline as much as possible, led me to create yet another Python script, one that is so simple, the whole process of conversion takes only a minute. And from the experience, I can promise you all that adding Alphabet data will make any model better by 10 times fold. So now we know the Alphabet is just one of many types of data that can be collected and used. So in order to train models not only for speech, but also for generation of images, text, animation, we will need data related to those parts, to those particular elements. And so, now I will pass the mic to Simpod, who will explain to you lovely folks about what he did in relation to the labels of the animation data.
Thanks, Katakanon. Let me start by giving an overview of what animation data looks like. Animation files are split up into layers, frames, and symbols. You can think of a layer as a single visual or audio track, which animators can easily flip on or off. A frame is a single still snapshot, and a symbol is an object, like Rainbow Dash's head. A single layer can contain many frames, each frame can reference many symbols, and each symbol can contain many layers. This keeps on repeating until you're down to basic shapes. Right now, we only care about labeling the character symbols, since that's what we're trying to animate. Labeling that turned out to be a pretty fast process, mostly because we were able to do it just by dragging and dropping image files into folders. There were two tricks here. The first is that a single frame in each symbol is usually enough to know exactly which character it is, so we only needed to dump one image for each symbol. The second is that we could set the file name of that image to tell us exactly which symbol that image belonged to. By moving those image files into named folders, we could use the folder names as labels for the symbols recovered from the file names. This process was made even faster by these codes that seem to appear in the file names. For example, the angel wings images here all contain these T codes, as Clipper calls them, followed by AW for angel wings. Usually the T codes tell us exactly which character we're dealing with. With these tricks, Clipper was able to sort all of the animation assets in 10 episodes over just 3 days, which was about 2,000 assets a day. Not bad. So once we have the cleaned and labeled data, the rest is easy. For packaging the data, it generally seems fine to just do whatever works. So far, AI Anons have been very flexible in what data they'll read, so it's not that big a deal how we package it. There are two things that have caused us problems in the past. The first would be giant files. If you're dealing with many gigabytes of data, don't use zip, and preferably don't use a compressed format unless compression makes a huge difference. Use tar files instead, since they're easier to work with regardless of how big they get. We had this issue for our 250 gigabyte animation dump. The second would be inconsistent data, usually coming from copy-paste errors and from encoding problems. This was more of a problem early in the PPP's history. It's better to choose a format where mistakes tend to be either unlikely or obvious, like CSV and Parquet. Other than that, the best thing we can do here is just keep it simple. No one is going to follow a complicated process just to package data. We won't spend more time on the details, since they're boring and obvious. And that, in a gist, is what the PPP does when it does data. We figure out what data we need, we find the sources, we put together the tools, we clean and label, and we package everything for our AI Anons. Before we move on, there's something I want to point out. This fandom has been really productive. We've generated a lot of data, including animations, music, art, fanfics, and so on. Ultimately, all of this is data that our AI Anons can use to power the fandom's content creators. If we succeed here, we can turn every Anon into a content creator, and we could have infinite content in a very real sense. There's plenty of work to do here, and as I hope you can see, there's a role for any Anon to contribute. The work here is hugely varied. Some of it is as simple as downloading and putting together data from multiple sources, some as complex as modding software to extract data, and some is for Anons that just want to understand and explain how content is made. We want to organize this fandom's data to make it universally accessible and useful. We want our content creators' past work to become a pillar for AI Anons to run wild. We want to beat out the CNDs, the content takedowns, and the deletions to make it all last forever. And we need Anons working together to make it happen. And now, I'll be handing it off to Cookie to explain what goes on inside the mind of an AI Anon.
Hello, everyone. I'm Cookie, and I'll be taking over for this portion of the panel. I'm one of the AI Anons working on the Pony Preservation Project. And you know what that means. Time to strap yourselves in. We're about to have a discussion on theoretical AI. For my section of the panel, I want to give you a sense for what kind of problems we think about on the AI side of speech generation, and why speech generation is hard. I also want to explain some tricks I use to improve the models. I'll be covering 6 topics that have been my main focus for the last year. To start off, I'll be showing you all the tricks I've learned of improving your first model. After that, I'll go into some of the more theoretical aspects of developing speech models and show the plans for achieving perfect quality, perfect stability, and maybe even perfect prosody. I'll also spend some time talking about untested ideas that I have, features we might add, and ways we can improve on research. I'll close this section with a brief discussion on why research paper results are often misleading and not useful for the pony preservation project. How to overhaul your first data set. This is one of the big things people can do to improve their voice quality. Some common problems I see when people are selecting files for their dataset is they'll mix together files from different microphones or different environments. They might select files with odd background noises. While background noise is fine, it must be easy to predict. You should also remove files where the speaker mumbles or speaks in a way you would not want to hear when you eventually use the model. Okay then, so here's another problem that I commonly see, especially with the Clipper dataset and anyone using an alphabet conversion script. If the speaker doesn't naturally stop at the end of the audio file, do not include any ending punctuation. And if the audio file ends at a pause before the end of a sentence, end the text in a comma or dash. For a real-world example of the problems this can cause, note that both 15.ai and my ngrok scripts have to automatically add a period if it's missing. Without this, the model fails significantly more often. Consider using additional punctuation that could relate to the output. Often missed examples include ellipses, which indicate trailing silence or long pauses, tilde, for flirtatious and playful speech, and capitals, which show anger or emphasis of a word. Before I begin to talk about models, I should mention, a spectrogram is a picture of sound. You can see a small one here, and there will be a couple more as we go through the slides. These spectrograms are generated by the first stage of the model, which takes text as input. These spectrograms are then turned into the actual audio by a second model, called a vocoder. We use spectrograms as an intermediate stage, as going directly from text to audio is much more difficult. Okay, now, how to overhaul your first model. You should focus on reducing validation loss and training loss. Validation loss represents how well your model can predict audio from text it has not seen before, while training loss indicates how blurry your spectrogram will be. In the next slide, I will explain what training loss is and how you can use it correctly. Training loss is a measure of how well the model performs on text to audio it has not seen before. To make validation loss work, it is important that the model has never seen the validation data during training. However, it is very common that people will use the same data for training and validation while trying to reduce their validation needs. If the training files and validation files overlap, that's like letting a pony cheat on their end-of-year test and considering that a useful way to check that they are learning the subject. It just doesn't work. Next, alignment strength. Attention strength. Attention strength is a number that represents how well the model has learned to use the text to generate the audio. If the attention strength is high, you know that the model understands what parts of the text link to what parts of the audio. A high attention strength will normally correlate with very clear, understandable audio. Whereas, if the attention strength is low, it's likely that the model will start blabbering or sounding like white noise, or will simply be harder to understand. So, here's an example of a good alignment from a good model and a bad alignment from a bad model. On the top row, you can see the alignment graph. In the middle row, you can see the audio that came out of the model. And in the bottom row, you can see the original target audio. In the top left, you can see a sharp, clear line from bottom left to top right. This shows a good alignment. You can also see directly underneath that while the predicted spectrogram doesn't look identical to the original, it does contain the correct words and it would be easy to understand. On the top right, you can see how the alignment starts clear, but then the model gets stuck. Directly below that, you can see that where it gets stuck, the output spectrogram gets darker. This suggests that the model got stuck on a period and was unable to escape to the next letters. The lower your alignment strength, or the more complex your text is, the more common these bad cases will be. Okay, now I've shown you 3 things you can focus on to improve your models. But wait, how do we make those things better? First, don't start from scratch. Use models that are publicly available that people have already trained. There's a good chance you're already doing this because it's built into most scripts. Second, you can improve your data sets. After training models, this is by far the easiest thing you can do and leads to the most improvements. Once the dataset is as good as possible, start finding the ideal size of your model and the ideal learning rate. You don't have to waste time manually setting those. There are tools that will do it for you. I've spent an age talking about turning text into spectrograms. The next step would be the vocoder, which turns the spectrograms into the sound you can actually hear. It's very common that people don't train the vocoder properly, or they use a vocoder that's trained on a different speaker. This can lead to issues where the output can sound tinny or bassy where it shouldn't. There are a variety of ways the vocoder can affect the audio, and it really depends on which vocoder you're using and how the spectrogram is generated. So, 3 things you should do to get a good vocoder. First, you should find a vocoder that's already trained on if you find a vocoder that's already trained on a different speaker, download it and train it on the speaker you're actually going to use. Second, an important one. Train the vocoder on spectrograms that came out of Tacotron. The vocoder can improve the audio quality by mostly compensating for the inaccuracy of Tacotron. This idea of having one model compensate also works in other circumstances and is almost always recommended. Third, just wait. High-quality vocoders keep coming out. As soon as you see them, use them. We used Waveglow last year. That caused headaches. But newer ones, like HiFiGan and WaveGrad, produce high-quality audio with almost no issues. These are basically the same things we mentioned last year, but between these 3 things, we've effectively resolved all of the problems with our vocoder. So, to sum it up, dear Princess Celestia, I didn't learn anything. I was right all along. Now I'm going to talk about what I'm focusing on and the problems that I have. This means getting clearer outputs and improving stability. You probably won't have to look into this because somebody is already solving it for you. This is my thought process and what I've been looking into over the past year. So, background. Tacotron predicts future audio from text and audio it's already seen in the same file. The objective of Tacotron is to produce the closest volume level for each pixel, but issues can arise when Tacotron has trouble predicting what that volume level should be. The further into the future Tacotron has to predict, the less confident the model will be and the blurrier the spectrogram will end up looking. This can cause issues, as if Tacotron isn't 100% confident, then the outputs can end up looking blurry. In the images above, you can see the original spectrogram, the training spectrogram, which shows what Tacotron predicts 1 frame into the future, and the inference spectrogram, which shows what would happen if Tacotron used its own output to help it predict the next frame, or basically what it would do when using brand new text. As you can probably tell, Tacotron's outputs look pretty blurry. This was a specially selected audio file from a very challenging speaker. However, this can happen to any audio and any text in an unlucky generation. This blur is something that cannot be compensated for by the vocoder. When you see this blur, that means you're going to have a bad audio file. It's going to sound fuzzy, it's going to sound electronic, it's not going to be good. Since the spectrogram blur is so strongly correlated with the confidence of the model, one way you could reduce the spectrogram blur would be by giving the model more information about the original spectrogram it's trying to create. By giving the model the original pitch at each point in the audio, the model can more easily produce an accurate spectrogram for the speech, even if the rest of the spectrogram doesn't look perfect. Having separate models work together for each category. For example, we can have a submodel dedicated to predicting the pitch of the audio from the input text. The output of that model will then be fed into the main model, marked with 100% confidence. With this perfect information, the main model becomes much more confident in its outputs, which leads to less blurry spectrograms and hence cleaner audio. The blur problem is solved more explicitly by an increasingly popular type of neural network called a VAE. The way that VAEs are able to solve spectrogram blur is by giving Tacotron a cheat sheet. For each frame, Tacotron is able to have a look at the target output, summarize it into some compressed key points, and use that to improve its own prediction of what the target should look like. There's a balance between the cheat sheet and the actual text. If the model depends too heavily on the cheat sheet while training, it will completely ignore the text you give it and just copy down answers directly from the cheat sheet. If the cheat sheet is too small, the model will just produce blurry outputs like Tacotron 2. Ideally, the cheat sheet should only be used for the finer details of audio and anything that it can't predict. When the cheat sheet is just the right size, you can change what's written on the sheet to get the model to change how it says the same line of text, and everything it says will still sound convincing. A new architecture called GANs uses a different approach by changing the original goal of Tachytron. Instead of focusing on producing an output that is as close to the original pixels as possible, GANs focus on producing an output that is convincing, even if less accurate on average. The way that GANs train is by having two models. You have one model that will generate audio and another model that figures out if the audio was real or fake. This is similar to two people learning to play chess well by playing against each other. When they start playing chess, they will play very poorly. As both of them play against each other more and more, they slowly become better at exploiting each other's flaws and defending against their own. After a few million games, they'll both be exceptionally good, despite the fact that one of them isn't actually better than the other over any long stretch of time. Here's an example of fast speech, and fast speech 2 with a GAN system. As you can see on the top, fast speech 2 looks good, and every letter is clearly visible, but everything looks slightly blurry. On the bottom, it looks significantly less blurry, and you could say that's a convincing audio file. That's the effect GANs have on model outputs. However, GANs do have some problems. In the green square, you can see some weird lines. They don't match up to any speech patterns, and I don't know why they're there. It's probably my fault, so I want to fix that before releasing any notebooks or models. Now, DPMs. I haven't used a DPM or written the code for one yet, so I shouldn't say too much about them. DPMs work by training a model to denoise audio. When you use the model, you simply take white noise and denoise it again and again and again. After 1,000 iterations of this, you will have a perfect output. This model has got my attention for 3 reasons. This model has shown itself to outperform basically everything in terms of the accuracy of the speech. This model is very easy to train. It requires basically no tuning. And even if you give the model no input data, it can still produce convincing outputs. So generally, it doesn't break and it can give super high quality results. So why are these things so rare? The simple answer is that these things are only just coming out for text-to-speech. VAEs were initially very difficult to train, though people have found some ways to make them train faster. DPMs are not common because they're just very new. They came out last year, and they were only able to beat out well-tuned GANs a few weeks ago. GANs are hard to train since they require a lot of tuning. If the tuning is even a little off, it's very easy for the whole model to stop making progress. We haven't seen any good, simple GANs yet, but it's possible they'll show up in the future, since they typically have the best quality and performance in other areas of AI. All right, now a slide on stability. There are numerous ways of increasing the stability of the Tachytron models. However, to save on time, I'm going to skip over all of that. The only way that I know that can improve the quality without any compromises and can improve the quality a decent amount is to run the text through the model multiple times and pick the audio output with the highest alignment strength. That's it. Just do it through brute force. That's what I do, that's what 15 does, and that's what you should probably do too. Okay, now I'm going to talk about how the model decides to voice the prosody. Prosody is everything about how a character speaks minus the content. It covers things like rhythm, stress, and intonations. Basically, a model can remember a few unique qualities of each letter or phoneme, but it can only remember a few hundred combinations of letters, which we put towards more common scenarios, like C plus H making a ch sound. Since the ch sound is significantly different to C and H, Tachytron will place strong emphasis on this. However, for less obvious differences, such as fuck and duck, Tachytron will treat these as basically the same word. You could make the model larger to remember more combinations, but in practice, there isn't enough text in the training data for the model to learn each word. Also, learning the meanings of words by what they sound like when people speak them isn't very effective. So, the way that we currently solve the issue of emotion and speaking speed is using a separate neural network called DeepMoji, which was trained to predict the emotion from tweets. Using DeepMoji along with the text can help the text-to-speech model understand what emotion and speaking speed it should use when generating the audio. There are positives and negatives of the Deepmoji network. One positive is that Deepmoji uses a single emotion to describe the entire text. This allows us to swap the text that is used to identify the emotion. The negative is that only one emotion is used to describe the entire text. So the model can struggle understanding which word should be focused on and how each word should be spoken. If the emotion shifts throughout the sentence, or if a word has more importance than other words, Deepmoji will not help. But advances on Deepmoji by providing information about each word rather than a single emotion representing the entire text. BERT was trained with a more complex goal of predicting missing parts of the text. So BERT learns basically everything about the text that could help it predict the next word. The one compromise I see when using BERT is that the length of the text has to be the same as the length of the tachytron input. With BERT, there's no easy way to use our usual tricks, like taking the emotion of one sentence and applying it to another. I might be able to fix this using both networks at the same time, but I haven't done it yet. Now, this goes into really uncharted territory. We have one problem that seems to be quite common. You see in the images above, 15 uploads a new test type. Anon A thinks it's more noisy than before. Anon B thinks it's better. And Anon C thinks it's quite good. 7 hours later, 15 realizes he hasn't updated the endpoint in the back end, so the site was still using the old model. One problem here is that the outputs from the same model can have a lot of randomness, so it's not always straightforward to compare two models. This can cause issues when we want to figure out whether we're actually making improvements. If you looked at 10 or 20 files, it's possible that you're looking at a lucky subset or are running into confirmation bias. Even worse for us AI anons, our current metrics of validation loss and alignment strength aren't actually that good either. With validation loss, if the model has any sort of slight preference to speech, it can snowball, and that slight preference can become a massive preference. Like when a model speaks, especially fast or slow, that's because it was speaking just a little too fast, and it kept snowballing. And it turns out alignment strength, our best metric, has an upper limit. As has been shown in papers with hard attention, as alignment strength goes up beyond a certain point, audio quality actually gets worse instead of better. There are some proposed solutions based on similarity metrics of network internals, though I have no idea if they work yet. There are some other tricks, like seeing how easy it is to reverse the generated speech back to the original text. We can also train a model to focus on what makes anons unhappy and avoid those outputs. Crazy idea. Why not make one of the model's goals to satisfy human values? I mean, duh. Right now, when you input long paragraphs into the model, the outputs can sound disjointed, where one sentence ends and the next starts. The emotion can shift rapidly if you have very small segments between each input to the model. That happens because there aren't enough long clips in the dataset. For example, in the MLP dataset, the average clip length is around 2 seconds long, which can only hold a very small amount of text. Probably the easiest way to deal with this is to make it so Tachytron can't tell the difference between text past some maximum length, say 4 seconds, effectively removing the model's perception of time. That way, the model never even needs to realize that it's dealing with a long input, and it'll be unaffected by text lengths longer than it's seen before. Now, I want to talk about some ways we can control the model that you might not have seen before. There are too many ideas to go into great detail, so this will be a quick fire round. For the first example, you can control the output of the model by using your own voice. If you speak in a happy way, you can have the model have a happy output. If you speak in a sad way, you can have the model produce a sad output. Alternatively, in the input text, you can specify a reference phrase. Then, tell the model to apply the emotion of that text to the speech it generates. You could pick the emotion from a list of available options, or you could manually control the pitch, energy, or rhythm using some sort of visual interface. Or you could blend together multiple speakers to create a voice that sounds like a mix. Imagine Rainbow Dash speaking with the rhythm of Pinky, as shown in Newbie Dash. Or maybe Chrysalis mockingly speaking as Cadence, while still retaining her dual tone voice. Now, the ideas are done. let's have a look at research papers. Oh, a lot of research papers are crap. The short reason for why is that the datasets they test on are crap. Academic papers very commonly use datasets like LJ Speech, BCTK, and LibriTTS. These are datasets of people doing things like reading the news or books. They tend to have very little variation in anything except pronunciation. Because of this, research papers are almost always able to get good results, even if their models are actually terrible. When you see a model in a research paper getting state-of-the-art results, that does not mean the same will happen for ponies. In this slide, you can see the enormous variety of scores that you can get with the same Tacotron 2 model on the same dataset. This shows just how much flexibility there is in measuring a model. Basically, just because a paper shows one score does not mean that architecture will get the same score each time it's evaluated. Each paper has its own way of calculating metrics, and the variety is enormous. You can compare values in the same table, but if you're looking at different papers, then don't bother using tables to compare them. MOS and CMOS are the main offenders. MOS is where you give humans an option of scoring something between 1 and 5. Quite often, the location of the person scoring, along with the surrounding information, can change their opinion of the ideal scores. CMOS is a comparative MOS, where 2 or 3 audio files are shown at the same time, and you have to pick which one is better and by how much. And now I'm going to talk about, wait, what happened to my slides? This wasn't here before. I had a slide in hierarchical active inference. There was
Okay, I muted him. That was going on way too long, so I'm here to swoop in and save the day. Let's get started quickly before the AI guys have a chance to throw more technobabble stuff at us. Now, you've all had a technical presentation of how the AI works and how some of our many talented AI anons have been tinkering with it, that I'm sure you've all thoroughly enjoyed and have been taking notes for the test on Monday. Now, it's all well and good seeing how this AI stuff works, but what about the question of what can I actually do with this? The answer is, of course, many things. It's high time we saw this AI stuff actually used for something, hence my intervention here. The beauty of having the ability to generate voice lines for pony characters on demand is that you can apply it to pretty much anything that involves speech, and over the course of the project, many anons have done exactly that. To name but a few examples, starting with the most obvious, that of course being your waifu professing her undying love to you. Though of course I'm sure you knew she loved you already, a nice little reminder never hurt. On a similarly comfy note, we've had several of the ASMR type stuff, most notably a relaxing meditation session with Princess Luna in her wonderful dreamscape. For the more practically minded, we had one anon a while ago who made Princess Celestia lines to use for custom voice instructions for Waze, which is a satellite navigation app for your phone that lets you change the lines of the spoken instructions. And on a similar vein, this could also be applied to other voice announcements such as ringtones and voice assistants. Then, on the more fun side, we have the pony thread simulators voiced by the actual ponies, as BGM has done, and also pony redubbings of movie scenes, as seen from Poopsikins. But of course, it doesn't stop there. You need only think slightly outside the box for many other ideas to manifest. Starting with the more basic ideas of skits and long-form radio plays and voiced fanfics, both prose and green text, having the characters act out various scenes that we never would have had in the show. We can evolve that into some more out-there ideas. As you probably know by now, there are many different text-to-speech models available for use, and the premise of one skit was to have these various different models all interacting with each other. Then, to top it all off, there's the creation of musical numbers, such as the much-loved Pony Zone series, and poetry recitals of your waifu telling you just how much she loves you. Those are some of the many examples of types of AI content that our wonderful audio producer anons have made over the past year or so. We're going to have a quick 5-minute break now to allow everyone a chance to regroup from the mental onslaught of the AI technobabble, after which BGM and I will take a lighter stride into this wonderful world of AI audio creation, showing you how you can supercharge your AI audio creations. Be right back.
Do you do poison?
Yes, actually.
What sort?
Oh,
What's it made of? What's it do? Why do they die?
well,
I mean, could it kill a pet? Quite a large pet? A sort of almost pony-sized pet?
I suppose.
I mean, what would it do to, say, a 25-year-old princess?
That's an interesting question.
Would it dissolve her stomach and make her lungs bleed until she drowned? Could it be detected in casserole?
No, I guess not.
What would it do to the face? Would it be hideously contorted? What would it do to this face? Would it come out pustules or a rash?
You see, the thing is...
Have you got anything that affects faces? Something that would make the skin melt painfully?
Oh, no, that won't do it all.
What are you saying? I've just got pets at home! Rats at home, haven't I? What would that rake do to a pony's head? I mean, would it go through the skull or just embed itself in it? Have you got any battering spades?
What?
Battering spades for battering a pony!
Right.
Have you got any hammers that would smash bone?
Get out. Yeah.
Motherfucker!
What's up, Zigga?
Gangster rap Zigger!
Zigga.
Zigger, 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 Zigger! You're 100% Zigger!
Zigga, 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 Zigga. I'm 200% Zigga.
Zigger, 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 Zigger! Why do boys hate Ziggers?
Zigger, 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 Zigger. They hate us cause our dicks are bigger.
Zigger, 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 Zigger! Why do you call yourself a Zigger?
Zigger, 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 Zigger. Cause I'm a motherfucking Zigger.
Zigger, 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 Zigger! Why do you drink so much beer?
Zigger, 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 Zigger. I don't drink beer, I drink malt liquor. Cause I'm a Zigger. I'm a motherfucking Zigger man. I ain't all that zebra equestrian shit. Fuck that, I'm a Zigger. I ain't mixed, I'm a Zigger. Z. A GTA, Zigger. You already know.
Thanks for joining me, by the way. Going out for lunch is a lot more fun when...
Look at me, Anon!
Oh, great.
Anon, watch this!
Just ignore her.
Anon, I'm gonna do a triple backflip off this rope and land perfectly on my hooves. It's gonna be awesome.
Don't give her any attention. She'll go away eventually.
Anon, look over here! Anon, you're gonna miss it! All right, here I go. Whoa! Heck, my bones, I think they're all broken.
No, they're not.
Anon, I'm dying. Help me.
She's fine.
Anon, you couldn't stop this with my last breath. I blame you.
Rainbow Dash, get up!
No, I'm dead, and it's all Anon's fault.
Oh, hey, Rarity! Rainbow Dash! Just who I was looking for! You have to help me get laid. You need to. What now? Get laid. I need to get laid. Wait! What? You want me to get laid? Laid.
Whoa.
Sexual intercourse, penis and vagina. I am the fucking culprit right now.
Wait, penis? I don't have that.
I thought you meant... I mean, I didn't think anything. No. Nothing at all.
What?
Who's what? Anyway, you're clearly the most, experienced. Marin, my suckle. So I thought you could help me find a suitable mate. What do you think, Rainbow Dash? I think you're calling me a slut. Oh, absolutely, darling.
Wait,
now, where would you start? I'm looking for someone cultured, well-mannered,
Hold on.
with a proper fashion
Okay.
sense,
Calm
a
down.
rugged, yet well-groomed appearance, financially independent, of course, but not too rich. I don't want him to overshadow my fashion career. Oh, he should be at least 6 foot tall.
Got it.
No coldnuts.
Wait,
and he should have a big lung.
All right, that's enough. I get the picture. So basically, you're looking for yourself with a dick.
Yes, I suppose that's right.
And why the sudden interest in date eating? I've never seen you care about anything that's not boring.
Well, a fine lady such as myself must always try new things.
Is this about Discord calling you a cat lady? I am not a cat lady. Oh, I knew it. Cat lady, cat lady, cat lady, cat lady, cat lady, cat lady.
Shut up.
All right. I'll help you, but you're gonna have to do things my way. Is that cool?
Cool as a summer breeze, darling.
All right, then let's get started.
My little pony, my little pony.
Foos, road.
Too loud.
Hello again, everyone, and welcome back. I am Clipper.
And I am BGM.
And we're here to discuss several simple strategies to improve the quality of your AI audios and bring them to life. To start off, here's a quick background on our audio editing experience.
My experience with audio editing has been mostly restricted to music up until March of last year when I joined the project. And while many of the skills carried over, there was still a lot to learn. Since then, I have created a wide variety of content using the AI voice models, including audio skits, animations, music, including but not limited to spin-offs of Geek Brony's Pony Zone, redubs, simulated Let's Plays featuring ponies, and so on.
In stark contrast to BGM, I have no prior audio editing experience beyond that which I used to build the pony voice datasets. So I'm coming at this from the perspective of someone who started off at basically zero and is now slightly above zero. Over the past few months, I've made several short skits, but I'm generally more well known for the dubbing of long-form green texts, classics such as the infamous Stallion Ritual and Woodlaw's legendary Insults and Magic. My goal here, as ever, is to show you all that anyone can learn to utilize these techniques to make great sounding audio, regardless of your previous expertise. In this segment, we'll be playing many audio clips to use as examples, so we highly recommend that you wear a decent pair of headphones for the best experience while listening to these audios. You know, now that I've just said that, the word audios, it's a bit vague and generic. I'm wondering if there's any better words we could use to refer to, an AI voiced skit. I think Twilight here actually agrees with me on this.
I've been thinking for a while now, and I've decided calling these things audios is just too awkward. Do we have any cunning linguists capable of coming up with a new term for these auditory creations?
Cunning what now?
Cunnilingus? No, cunning linguists. Cards and benches? No. Ugh.
Well, who am I to disobey a direct order from our PoneAI overlords? From here on out, all AI audios shall hence be referred to as cunnilingus. Thanks to the Pony Preservation Project, we are at a point at which we can create cunnilingus of a style and quality that rival that of the show itself. While it can be a bit tedious at times, creating high-quality cunnilingus is easier than you might think. Our goal here is to show you how you can take your cunnilingus from the raw building materials and transform it into so much more. To give an example, we've created a short little skit, which we'll be referring to as we go throughout this section to highlight examples of each technique we discuss.
To set the scene, Fluttershy has been asked to come on stage to talk to our wonderful audience. However, she's having some typical stage fright. Luckily, her best friend RealDash is on hoof to help resolve the situation. Now, here are the raw voice lines we generated for this script, with no editing whatsoever.
Oh dear. Oh no. Fluttershy, you're up. No. Come on. We've got a schedule to keep. What if I mess up? I'll be a laughingstock. I can't go out there. I'll get bullied forever. And what if? Whoa! No time for that! Just move it! Oh dear.
Not very impressive, is it? Now, let's hear it again, this time with editing to bring it to life.
Oh dear. Oh no! Fluttershy, you're up! No! Come on! We've got a schedule to keep! What if I mess up? I'll be a laughingstock! I can't go out there! I'll get bullied forever! And what if? No time for that! Just move it! Oh dear.
And so the heroic RealDash saves the day once again. So nice to see friends helping each other out, right?
So that's an example of what you can build with just the AI voice lines, some sound effects and music, and some basic audio editing techniques. On this slide, we've summarized the techniques that were used in the creation of this skit, and as we go through the segment, we'll break them down one by one and explain how each of them are used to make the cunnilingus just that little bit better. We'll start with the simplest of these techniques and gradually descend down the iceberg as we progress through the segment. Don't worry if it all seems a bit daunting. While it does take a bit of work, just about anyone can do it. Applying even the simplest of these methods of editing can make a massive difference in the perceived quality of any kind of cunnilingus project. Remember, it's not the size that matters, it's how you use it.
So what can you basement chads do to liven up your cunnilingus? Surely you need some kind of complex and dedicated setup for all this, right? Well, no, not at all. In fact, all of the techniques we're going to show you can be done in Audacity using nothing more than a potato PC. So let's now break down our example skit and discuss the techniques you can use to enhance your cunnilingus, starting with the basic techniques.
Let's start with planning the scene. For this, we need to consider three main points: the scenario, the location, and the characters. Think about the emotional tone of the story, the characteristics of the environment, and how the characters are feeling and what they're trying to achieve. For this aspect of the planning, it may be helpful to write out a script before doing anything else, or if you're working with something already made, such as a green text or filmfic story, adapting it into a script form. This will solidify the idea in your mind and give you a clear vision of what the cunnilingus will need. Let's now take all these concepts of planning and apply them to our example skit. For the story outline, we have Fluttershy being stunted by her stage fright, and Rainbow helping her to work through it. This also ties into the point about characters and their motives. In this setting, we'd generally expect Fluttershy to be nervous, and Rainbow to be a cunt. Finally, the setting. Where are we? We're backstage, in a relatively small room, and then later, we're actually on the stage, in a big room. This will also influence the effects we use, and we'll go into detail about how we do all of that a bit later. For now, the most important thing is to understand how the story and setting will influence the cunnilingus later on. Think of this as imagining the blueprints, which you will later use to build your house.
Once you've determined the basics of how your scene works, you can get started on laying the groundwork. Seeing as how most cunnilingus focuses on characters, you'll probably want to start by getting your dialogue generated and laid out. One of the first things you may notice in any generated line is that there is often some noise. While this is becoming less of an issue over time, at the moment most models will still generate unwanted buzzing or static atop your line from time to time. So how do we fix this? Simple, we use noise reduction. For this, you'll need to clip out a part of the dialogue that contains only noise, or if you don't have a good noise sample from the lines you generate, you can obtain some noise by giving the model a nonsense input, like the example given here. Once you have that sample of noise, you can feed it to Audacity's noise reduction. This slide contains a video demo of how to use this tool, but we won't be playing it for the sake of runtime. We'll be making all these slides public shortly after the presentation, so you can come back to your reread and watch all the demos as much as you need. Apart from the static buzzing, there's other types of noise that may be undesirable as well. Things such as out-of-place breaths can make a line's delivery sound strange. You may also hear some residual isolated noise at the end of the speech. For such things, we can simply cut it out and call it good.
So that's the most basic of editing taken care of. Let's now shift focus onto getting good outputs from the models and putting them together. The output of most models is non-deterministic, meaning that you'll get different outputs from the same inputs. This means that you won't necessarily get a perfect delivery within the first 1, 10, or even 100 generations of a line. However, there are many ways to guide the AI in the right direction. One of the ways of doing this is using the emotional contextualizer that 15AI and many other models offer. By inputting the line you want spoken, alongside a phrase that matches the emotion you want it spoken in, you can get the lines delivered in a way that may be difficult to achieve otherwise. For example, let's say we want Twilight to say, "Do you think I am retarded?" in an angry tone. If we throw the line into 15AI without contextualization, we get this.
Do you think I am retarded?
Now if we try again, this time with the contextualization phrase of, "I'm gonna fucking kill you," we get this.
Do you think I am retarded?
As you should be able to hear, the angry line is delivered in a much harsher tone.
Do you think I am retarded? Do you think I am retarded?
Another important aspect of how a line strikes emotionally is its pacing. For instance, if you want a character to sound sad, intonations can be as perfect as you want, but if the character's talking at 1,000,000 miles an hour and delivering their lines with no pauses in between, chances are you're not going to get the correct emotional resonance. This is where pacing comes in. Now, pacing's mostly about two different aspects: the speed at which a line is delivered, and the spacing between one line and the next. If the model's speaking too fast, try adding commas to your input text. With a bit of luck, placing them in unusual places can reduce the overall speed at which the line is read, without causing unnatural sounding pauses. You can also add some full stops and commas to the very start of your input, which has been observed to generally give slower and lower energy outputs. Now on to spacing, which is simply adding a bit of space within and/or between the voice lines. Figuring out exactly how much dead space is appropriate can be a tricky task. Too little and the dialogue will sound rushed. Too much, and you'll end up with awkwardly long pauses. Finding the sweet spot is mostly up to critical listening, combined with trial and error. To demonstrate this, consider this sequence of lines from the example skit, paying particular attention to the pacing of the lines. The first clip is the raw lines pasted one after another with no additional editing. The second is the fully edited version. You should notice that the spacing between the lines is generally larger in the edited version, especially during Fluttershy's listing of the worst-case scenarios, and we use those pauses to add contextual sound effects, such as nervous gasps and yelps.
What if I mess up? I'll be a laughingstock. I can't go out there. I'll get bullied forever. And what if? Whoa!
No time for that!
What if I mess up? I'll be a laughingstock. I can't go out there. I'll get bullied forever. And what if?
No time for that!
It should be obvious that adding these pauses for pacing makes Fluttershy's listing of worst-case scenarios more impactful, compared to rattling the list off at breakneck pace.
Now, even with all these techniques for influencing the AI, the dialogue may still not be perfect. If a model refuses to cooperate, remember that you don't have to stick to the script. It's perfectly fine to add, change, or even remove some lines or words if it just isn't working right. For example, in the demo skit, we originally had Rainbow saying the line, "Just move it," as "Move it, Missy."
Move it, Missy.
As you can hear, the AI just couldn't say Missy with the emotion and energy level we needed. It would always either be distorted or low energy, even with different emotion contextualizers. The simplest solution turned out to be to just eliminate that part of the line entirely. This then gave us the desired emotional delivery and energy level.
Just move it!
The difference is night and day. "Move it, Missy," to "Just move it!" One simple change can make all the difference.
Move it, Missy! Just move it!
So that's a lot of tools and potential solutions that we've just thrown at you, and you may be feeling a bit overwhelmed. So to reel it in a bit, we'll finish this part of the discussion by showing you a potential one-size-fits-all approach to fixing issues with emotion and pacing, and that is segmentation and splicing. For an explanation of this, we will defer to a segment written by RealDash.
To be clear, this slide is me reading an adapted version of a submission from RealDash, one of the content creator anons in the thread who focuses on particularly high quality and very immersive cunnilingus. Emotion is a bit tricky with 15AI. While in the last few versions the models have vastly improved in emotion, sometimes to get them to express their dialogue in the way you want it requires splicing and generating. Splicing and generating refers to splitting up your inputs into multiple segments, and then building the line from the best parts of the segments you generate. It's usually best to splice at the point where the issue occurs, like when a certain word is consistently delivered incorrectly or a particular segment is too fast or slow. Here are some examples from the first Rainbow Dash cunnilingus. What you hear first will be the original generated clips, followed by the stitched together clip. You'll hear 3 examples, each made up of 3 clips. The first 2 clips in each example are the original lines, and the third is the combination of the best parts of those 2 clips. They all follow the same splicing pattern, that being combining the first half of the first clip and the second half of the second clip.
I'm not just gonna sit around and watch you kill yourself. I'm not gonna sit around and watch you die. I'm not just gonna sit around and watch you die. That's bullshit and you know it. And you know it. That's bullshit and you know it. You've been struggling to stand the whole time I've been here. The whole time I've been here. You've been struggling to stand the whole time I've been here.
From this, we learned that we don't need the AI to be 100% for every line. Even botched attempts can still contain useful material. So that's it for the most basic of techniques. So far, we've mostly covered the tips for planning your cunnilingus and getting better dialogue outputs from the AI. These are applicable to any kind of voice project. We'll now discuss some intermediate techniques that are more situational and have a higher scope for variation between different kinds of cunnilingus. This will mostly be music and sound effects, and there are many layers to discuss here. So let's start simple, with background effects.
Background effects are the ambient stuff going on that is generally irrelevant story-wise, apart from setting the scene and helping the audience to understand where we are. Things like wind, birds chirping, background chatter, and the like. For an example of this, we can refer back to the first few seconds of our example skit, where we have muffled crowd chattering in the background to indicate a large audience on the other side of the wall. This helps to establish the scene and environment before the speech actually starts. In most cases, this is going to be the most beneficial addition to your cunnilingus compared to time invested. As long as your background effects fit the location your characters are supposed to be in, loop somewhat seamlessly, and aren't too loud, no other editing is usually required. There are exceptions to this. For example, say you want a raging storm that gets worse over time. In such a case, you could edit in points where the storm takes center stage to punctuate its worsening. The easiest way to find ambience tracks is to simply search the music folder in the master file too for tags such as nature and crowd. This will give you a bunch of options that should loop well with minimal extra editing. If you need help setting up some looping background effects, this slide has another video demo. If you need some more specific effects that aren't in Clipper's master file, you can search YouTube. Once you have your background effects set up, you can then start building on it with sound effects.
Speaking of, sound effects are what you use to indicate to the audience a character's actions and their environment's reactions, and play a crucial role in making both the characters and the scene feel alive and animated. Punctuating keywords in a sentence with movements based on their emotion can also help to further emphasize the dialogue, on top of making the characters feel more alive. Things like emphasizing a character's anger with a face hoof.
Come on!
Now, ponies are somewhat unique from other shows in their movements and capabilities. Pegasi have their wings, unicorns their horns, and earth ponies their nothing. And they should use Fast's gifts where appropriate for their tasks and their characters. For instance, you'd expect to see Twilight using her horn over her hooves for most tasks, even ones as simple as holding an object. Put it this way, she's less likely to prefer giving a hoof job than a glow job. Using your understanding of the characters to influence the actions the characters take, and therefore the sound effects you choose, can help both emphasize the character's unique traits, as well as make the scene feel more dynamic. Let's apply this to our example skit. Rainbow Dash, having a passion for flight, tends to not touch the ground all that often. Fluttershy, on the other hand, generally only uses her wings in situations where doing so is most practical. We represent this with flying sound effects for Rainbow, and the absence of such for Fluttershy.
Oh no! Fluttershy, you're up!
schedule to keep.
What if I mess up?
You should have been able to hear, for Rainbow, a single set of wings going throughout the clip, along with some whooshing and zooming sounds, whereas Fluttershy had hoof steps instead, remaining firmly on the ground. Lastly, don't be afraid to look for outside sources if you need additional sound effects. Sites like YouTube and Freesound host a wide variety of sound effects that can help wonders if what you're looking for just isn't in the sound effects folder.
So we've discussed voices and sound effects. However, there's still one more major component of Cunnilingus that's missing, and that is music. Music plays an important role in setting the tone of the story, as well as punctuating certain events. Music also informs the audience of the emotional tone of the scene, as well as the emotion the characters are feeling. This is especially important in Cunnilingus, as we won't normally have visuals to show the audience such things. So, how do we choose a fitting piece of music for our scene? Well, the most important things to look for are the proper emotion and the correct length. Music in the master folder is organized by emotion and context, so usually a good approach is to search for the emotion you're looking for and consider options that match the time you need it to last for. Listen closely and compare your options. Keep in mind that music, like dialogue, also has elements of pacing, intonation, and emphasis, so you need to listen closely to make sure that your music choice matches up to your dialogue. There are multiple interpretations of happy and sad, so just because a music clip has the emotion tags you're looking for doesn't necessarily mean it will match your dialogue. Here's an example from our demo skit. In this one, we've swapped the anxious music that plays while Fluttershy lists off what could go wrong.
We've got a schedule to keep.
What if I mess up? I'll be a laughingstock. I can't go out there. I'll get bullied forever. And what if?
No time for that!
Now, the transition of that anxious music actually flows quite well into the next bit from Rainbow. But the problem here is that the music clip has a climax point right in the middle of Fluttershy's list, which isn't consistent with the flow of her speech. It's also quite loud, which obscures some of her dialogue.
We've got a schedule to keep.
What if I mess up? I'll be a laughingstock. I can't go out there. I'll get bullied forever. And what if?
No time for that!
You could use the second half of this music clip just fine, though in this case you may want to replace the first few seconds with something else. This obviously varies heavily on a case-by-case basis, so once again, you should trust your ears.
For the last part of the intermediate segment, we'll consider directional audio. Directional audio is the use of panning the audio balance left and right to position and move things within your scene. Without it, most things will sound like they're happening directly in front of the listener. Proper use of directional audio can make your scene feel 3D, in a sense, with things sounding like they're placed in positions all around the listener, helping to build immersion, as well as more accurately conveying where exactly things are happening and how things are moving. A good example of this comes from the start of the demo skit, where Fluttershy is nervously pacing. Listen closely to how the position of the voice and hoof steps changes in your ears as the scene plays.
Oh dear. Oh no!
You should have been able to hear Fluttershy's voice and hoof steps panning from left to right. Applying directional audio is very simple to do in Audacity, and this slide has another demo video showing you how to do it. So now we have our voices, our sound effects, and our music laid out, and by now it's probably sounding pretty decent. But there's still more we can do to take it the extra mile, using special effects. Special effects come in a wide variety and do many different things. For the sake of brevity, we're only going to focus on the effects that will be most commonly applicable to Cunnilingus, those being echo, reverb, and equalization, also known as EQ. With these building blocks, you can construct pretty much any effect you can think of, such as the dual tone commonly associated with the voice of Chrysalis, an angelic, godlike echo effect, or distortion from someone speaking through a defective radio speaker. Depending on how much you want to do, Effects like these can potentially be the second easiest way to increase the perceived quality of your cunnilingus, behind the addition of background effects. This is because once you've worked out what settings you need for a given situational effect, you can simply apply it to all the dialogue with a single click.
Let's start then with reverb. Reverb is something that you hear every day, perhaps without realizing it. In basic terms, reverb is sound bouncing around the area and returning to your ears. The characteristics of reverb are determined by the size and composition of your surroundings, and this will imply in any environment that your scene takes place in. This means that reverb can help almost any scene as long as the settings match the location. Reverb as a whole is a large subject to tackle, so for the sake of time, as well as not boring you to death, we're going to spare you of the in-depth explanations and instead just focus on the key factors that go into choosing the settings to use for any given situation. The main setting will be that of room size. Think of this as the one master setting upon which everything else is built. This should be fairly self-explanatory. It describes, well, the size of the room. So you'd want to use a very low setting for something like a closet, a medium-low setting for a typical room, a high setting for the princess's throne room, and a super high setting for a dragon's cave or a trip down Ghastly Gorge. For a quick demo of reverb, listen to the voice of Fluttershy after she's punted onto the stage.
Oh dear.
You can hear that the voice bounced around almost as much as Fluttershy did.
Another setting to control the tone of your reverb is damping. This describes the materials that your surroundings are made of, specifically how absorbative they are to bright sounding tones. Bright in this case referring to tones in the higher range of the frequency spectrum. Think cymbals on a drum kit, or glass shattering. Low damping means low absorbance, or high sound reflectivity, and high damping means high absorbance, or low sound reflectivity. To demonstrate this, let's consider a changeling hive. In a typical room, with the walls being made of rock, you'd want moderate damping. For when you get captured and dragged into Chrysalis's brood chamber, which is full of squishy and sound-absorbent goo, you'd want high damping. And when you progress into her sex dungeon, where the walls are mostly made of metal, you'd use low damping, as well as your human stamina. For a practical demonstration of these effects, Queen Chrysalis herself has graciously provided an example of herself speaking in these different environments. First, a generic room made of rock. Moderate damping, moderate sound reflectivity.
A live body and a dead body contain the same number of particles. Structurally, there's no discernible difference.
Now, the goo-coated walls of the brood chamber. High damping, low sound reflectivity.
A live body and a dead body contain the same number of particles. Structurally, there's no discernible difference.
And the metal walls of the sex dungeon. Low damping, high sound reflectivity.
A live body and a dead body contain the same number of particles. Structurally, there's no discernible difference.
Try not to read too much into the exact lines she chose to use for the demo. The dungeon is safe, I promise.
There's also wet gain and dry gain, or wet-dry balance, depending on software. The term dry refers to the original input audio, and wet refers to the generated reverb effect. Higher wet gain will make the reverb more pronounced. In most cases, wet gain should only be set highly in moments where you really want to emphasize the size and characteristics of a room. Otherwise, it should be kept relatively low.
And that's a very broad overview of the settings you'll see in a typical reverb tool. It's hard to get into anything more specific without a deep dive into how sound works, so we'd suggest looking at some more detailed tutorials on YouTube or similar for more information. Generally, a good approach for finding the right settings to use for your reverb is to start by matching the room size and length of the reverb to the size of the location, and then work from there until it sounds right. Note that there are several presets built into Audacity that can be used as well, which should give a good head start on getting the settings you need for some generic locations. One final point. Different audio editing softwares and plugins may have differing terminology and nomenclature for the settings we've discussed in this section, so if you come across any terms or settings in your software that aren't covered here, then I'd suggest you read the fucking manual.
Let's now move on to echo, or delay. Two different names, but they serve the same purpose. For a basic explanation, echo can be considered to be a very specific type of reverb, which occurs over a considerably longer time frame. Since echo works on longer time frames, subtle use of it can help to sell the large expanse of outdoor locations where sound has a long distance to travel and reflect. With that in mind, any scenes that take place outdoors should have a slight echo effect applied. In Audacity, a delay time of about 0.2 seconds and a delay factor of about 0.02 should be sufficient. These are of course only guidelines, and we encourage you to play with the settings to find what works best for you. Using echo more heavily can be good for when characters are far away and/or yelling loudly outdoors or from off-screen. The sound of long reflections of their voices will emphasize the distance over which the sound travels. With distance as a factor, keep in mind that this will also often be paired with directional audio. Now, a demonstration of echo. Here we have some clips from Season 2, Episode 18, A Friend Indeed. The first clip is an example of the subtle outdoor echo effect. Listen closely to the speech, and you should be able to hear a slight echo effect.
Morning, Daisy Joe. You here to pick up some cookies to go with your milk?
Oh, yeah, Pinky, don't you know?
As I said, the effect is subtle, so we'll play that one more time. If you struggle to hear the effect, turn your volume up and pay particular attention to Daisy Joe's line. The effect is more pronounced there.
Morning, Daisy Joe. You here to pick up some cookies to go with your milk?
Oh, yeah, Pinky, don't you know?
Hopefully the stream didn't degrade the audio quality too much. Now onto the more overt type of echo, generally applied to outdoor yelling. This should be much easier to hear.
Hey, everybody! Does anybody have a toupee? What's so funny? This is serious business, everybody! Cranky needs a new wig to cover his hairless head!
Try to imagine these yelling lines without any echo. They likely sound like they're being spoken into an infinitely absorptive void. So essentially, if you're outdoors, chances are your scene would benefit from some kind of echo effect. It's a great way to sell very large open environments and to emphasize the scale of the area.
Now onto the final technique we'll discuss in this segment, and that is the equalizer, or EQ. In Audacity, you'll find this under the filter curve setting in the effects menu. EQ allows you to precisely change the volume of specific frequencies in your cunnilingus, which for our purposes can be used to apply specific effects to the vocals. Say for example you want it to sound like a character is in another room. For that, we can cut out the higher frequencies of our dialogue using EQ, and add reverb to make it sound convincingly like there's a wall between the character and us. This will give a muffled effect. For an example of this, here's another clip from A Friend Indeed, where Pinky is talking from behind Cranky's locked door.
Cranky, it's me again. I understand that you don't want to be my friend or accept my apology, but before I leave you alone forever, I have something to at least try to make up for ruining your book.
No, I don't want it, kid. Anything you would give me is sure to lead to some sort of disaster.
Goodness, you really are cranky.
There are, unfortunately, way too many aspects of EQ to cover in the time we have, so we'll have to leave it at that. You should also be able to find guides and presets for more specific situations by searching tutorials on YouTube or similar.
And there we go. That's all of the effects and techniques that we wanted to cover. Now, it's all well and good knowing about these techniques and maybe hearing a few examples, but we think it would be best if we could relate it to the show. As an exercise for the listeners, especially those who are feeling inspired to use the AI for new cunnilingus, we'd like to end our section with a summary of the editing techniques we've discussed, and the kinds of situations in which you may observe them in the show. Gaining insights into how the show uses audio to construct its environments will help provide more examples of good use of these techniques, and help you all to appreciate the effort and little details that go into making the show that we all love. Starting off then with pacing. This should be applicable to any given audio, any given scenario. Listen out for times when lines are spoken softly and slowly in sad or tense situations, and then fast-paced for fear, anxiety, and great happiness, and so on. Pacing may also be used to inform character traits, such as Fluttershy and Big Mac generally speaking softly and slowly, and Rainbow and Pinky being loud and boisterous.
Background effects are also applicable to pretty much any given scenario. Listen out for little details like birds and gentle wind in a typical Ponyville scene, spooky sounds in the Everfree Forest, and banjos at Sweet Apple Acres.
You'll also hear plenty of music in the show, so when a scene starts to shift in a particular direction of tone and/or emotion, listen for how the music changes. Try to see how much context you can get while focusing only on the music. Listen also for the speed, volume, and general intensity as the scene gets more or less energetic. As for sound effects, there are of course too many examples to summarize here, so I'd suggest focusing on movement-based sounds, especially the more subtle ones. Stuff like little swishes for arm and leg gestures, how hoof steps sound on different surfaces, and how those sounds can relate to a character's mental state. This is especially relevant for cunnilingus, as these sounds are typically second only to the actual voices in terms of communicating how a character is feeling and what they're doing.
Now on to the more advanced stuff. We'll start with directional audio. This is often reserved for times when a character is talking from off-screen or otherwise far away. The best places to listen out for this would be times when a new character is introduced to the scene and isn't immediately in frame.
For reverb, listen to how a character's voice changes as they move from one environment to another. There will often be a change in the sound of the reverb as they move into larger or smaller rooms. You could also try observing this using your own voice. Reverb effects will generally be more obvious in large open rooms, such as Celestia and Luna's throne room. You'll also hear a persistent reverb effect in Season 1, Episode 19, A Dog and Pony Show, when the main six are in the Diamond Dog's underground caverns in pursuit of rarity.
Following on from reverb, we'll also consider echo. This is most obvious when a character is speaking from far away in large open spaces and is often paired with directional audio. It will also frequently punctuate loud speaking and yelling. Though one other less obvious example will be in any generic scene that takes place outdoors. Next time you're watching a scene that takes place in typical Ponyville, put on your headphones and listen carefully. You should be able to hear a subtle echo effect, especially when they raise their voices.
Lastly, equalization, or EQ, is much more situational and will be most obvious in special circumstances that call for significant alteration to the sound of a voice. This will be situations like a character talking from another room or behind some other similar barrier, wherein the voice will sound muffled.
And that concludes the topics we're going to cover for this section on supercharging your AI voice creations. As you've seen, there are many great ways to improve the quality of your voiced skits, shitposts, and all alike, ranging from basic planning and AI tips and tricks, simple editing techniques, and all the way through to more complex effects which can be used to construct a more immersive environment to set the scene. I know it may seem like a lot of information to take in, and you may be feeling a little overwhelmed at all the material we just presented to you. And that's okay. I felt just as overwhelmed at the start too. Understand that I didn't start with all this knowledge and experience. I'm not an audio engineer of any description. My techniques and workflow were built upon and iterated over several months of experimenting myself and watching and learning from the many other talented audio creators we have in the thread, BGM, RealDash, Snoopy Anon, and many more who remain anonymous. As I made more skits, I gradually started to incorporate more of these techniques as time went on, usually focusing on one particular aspect in each project I made, such as reverb, directional audio, and the effective use of sound effects. I suggest any aspiring cunnilingus artists in the audience take a similar approach to what I did. Take it one step at a time. Listen to the many examples we have in the PoneAI drive, and if you get stuck with anything, just ask in the thread. We'll be happy to help you out.
One final thing before we wrap up this section, our very own RealDash also wrote a submission for this presentation detailing his approach and techniques to the cunnilingus he makes. We've used elements of it here and there to help write and demonstrate this segment, but we didn't read it out verbatim. If you're interested in reading the whole thing, we'll leave a link to it on this slide. This slide also has links to the PoneAI drive, which is an archive of all the best AI voice creations, which you can use as examples to refer to when creating your own cunnilingus. And also a link to the sound effects and music folder in Clipper's master file, which contains 4 seasons worth of various music clips and sound effects extracted from the show.
I'll also take this final opportunity to remind you all that these slides and the presentation recordings will be publicly available shortly after broadcast. We'll post the links in both the con thread and the PPP thread, so you can come back and review and re-listen as much as you need. To wrap it all up then, we'll play the example skit for you one final time, so that you may fully appreciate all the techniques and little details that we just discussed in the context of a piece of fully produced cunnilingus.
Oh dear. Oh no! Fluttershy, you're up! No! Come on! We've got a schedule to keep! What if I mess up? I'll be a laughingstock! I can't go out there! I'll get bullied forever! And what if? No time for that! Just move it! Oh dear.
Alrighty, let's talk about something I've been working on in the shadows for about a year by now. A project that happened directly because of inspiration provided by all the PvP anons. My work hopefully brings us a little bit closer to having real pony waifus one day. And you may have already seen some progress reports in the PvP threads, but if not, just wait until the end of the presentation for a demo. The last couple of years have been truly amazing for AI and machine learning. It's becoming more and more accessible, hardware gets cheaper, models provide higher quality results, and researcher collaboration is as strong as it's ever been with an amazing culture of code sharing. Machine learning is no longer just about chasing high scores and benchmarks. Individuals are now empowered to combine openly available tools and models to build actual state-of-the-art products. Let's go on a journey that covers the progress in the areas beyond voice generation. The year is 2015. Season 5 is airing, MLP fandom is going strong, and somewhere in the shadows, Elon Musk and 2 other guys dropped $1 billion, and I'm not kidding, it was $1 billion, to start an AI company. In the words of the man himself, OpenAI was created to empower as many people as possible to have AI. If everyone has AI powers, then there is not any one person who can have AI superpowers. Elon Musk is a pretty controversial person, and the way he phrased the company goal is definitely interesting, but $1 billion is a lot of money. So did they make some AI out of all that cash? Oh yes, they did. By combining a large dataset of texts from the internet with null architecture transformers, OpenAI, the company that Elon Musk created, developed a technology called Generative Pre-trained Transformers, or GPT for short, currently version 2. What GPT-2 is very good at is predicting the next word in some text. This may sound super nerdy and not that useful for our goal of making real pony waifus until you realize something. If you are very good at text prediction, like very, very good, you unlock an absolutely amazing AI superpower. What if you start with a question about ponies specifically? If the AI is really good at text prediction, one word at a time, it will answer your question. Ask another question, And again, it will reply naturally, taking into account what was already mentioned. The AI doesn't understand what it's talking about. It really doesn't care. But just through the fact of being very good at generating text that makes sense, it can create an illusion of a real human or pony being on the other side. Take that, Alan Turing. In fact, GPT-2 was so good at this whole text prediction thing that OpenAI had concerns that releasing their most advanced version of GPT-2 would lead to people being fooled by the AI and used for fake news generation and propaganda. To our disappointment, their worries were blown out of proportion, and humans were able to distinguish AI writing. Usually. Not always. So, can we make it pony? We already have the technology available, so the only remaining thing is to source a lot of pony content from somewhere. Side note, having noticed that this whole theme of datasets being super important. Yeah, because no matter how amazing is your tech, the content you use is an equal half of the equation. Good news, MLP fandom is one, if not the most active and creative communities when it comes to many forms of art. Film fiction alone is close to 7 gigabytes of compressed text, already archived, available for download, all thanks to the work of the authors, admins, and the unofficial film fiction archive. Even better, the fanfiction is already categorized, voted for, and even marked for appropriate age group. After all, half of the MLP content is heavily not safe for work. But there is something fascinating in all of this. What we teach our model, that's not facts. It is, after all, just text prediction, which needs a lot of samples to learn to know what makes sense. So we keep feeding it fanfiction over and over and over again. And the model is very good at learning common patterns in that sea of data. So what it learns is what majority of authors agree on, and their readers reinforce it by ranking the fanfiction. So in the end, we teach the model what we think the ponies are. And that is a problem, because apparently we want ponies to love us and love them back. So the whole dataset is poisoned with romance, friendship, and hugs and kisses. And no matter how much you want to write a hard-side novel with ponies, in some weird form of Godwin's law, some pony will end up proposing their love to you given enough time. Well, in the safe for work part of the dataset at least. There is another challenge. As plentiful as the content is, and we do want as much of it as possible, in a way we have too much of it. All of the things above are valid, and they all depend on the context, which remains one of the biggest problems so far. While we do have some control over this, we have to plan in advance by methodically marking the datasets. Even with that taken care of, when generating text, the amount of context GPT models can take is still limited. So, if your conversation with a pony starts to feel like a fever dream, it is most likely because they literally forgot about something critical mentioned just a couple of sentences before. Okay, so now we have content and we have the tech. Are we done? It turns out, not really. OpenAI spent tens of thousands and perhaps hundreds of thousands of dollars on compute costs teaching GPT-2. But we have some ways of getting around this ridiculous cost. We can use a technique called fine-tuning. Instead of starting with a blank state, we start where OpenAI stopped, we already have all the impressive capabilities of the model. And remember, they had to teach the model what English language is literally from scratch. And now we will teach it about Pony. The operation is much cheaper, but we are still talking about thousands of dollars and specialized hardware called tensor processing units, which is necessary for this fine-tuning process. And side note, it's not required anymore for a lot of tasks, but we worked on this a couple of months ago. Apparently, the world is full of amazing opportunities and people. First of all, Google is running a special program called TPU Research Cloud, which allows researchers to get access to their top-end computing hardware at no cost. The only problem is that it is still limited in both the amount of resources and how long you can use them. But turns out some machine learning researchers in the community also believe that Pony waifus are important. And as a big shout out, I want to mention that after hearing about our project, two individuals, Vern and Sean, from the TensorFork project, help us with technical expertise and negotiated with Google to give us more TPUs. Way more TPUs we could have dreamed about. So, if you are a machine learning researcher or AI specialist, just go get it. But if not, just keep listening. So, all of that happened in 2019 and 2020. Old news. Did things progress since then? Oh, absolutely. OpenAI created GPT version 3. Google created their own similar architecture, and a bunch of other companies jumped on the hype train too. The cost of training went significantly down due to faster hardware and new techniques. And to the surprise of real machine learning researchers, turned out that building larger models with bigger datasets and throwing more compute power at them works really well. Well, at least for now. Except things went bad pretty fast. OpenAI decided not to release GPT-3 and only provide commercial access, eventually becoming Microsoft's exclusive partner. AI Dungeon, a project that originally popularized GPT-2 in the first place and continued working with OpenAI on GPT-3 version, destroyed their community overnight by becoming thought police and introducing human moderation. Because think of AI children, I guess? Yet, the genie was already out of the bottle. Other researchers got on the task of replicating GPT architecture and creating their own models. In March 2021, a project called Eleuther AI presented their two open-source GPT-like models with the size of 1.3 billion and 2.7 billion parameters, matching and nearly doubling the original largest GPT-2 model. And that model was trained on The Pile, a 1.2 terabyte collection of various texts, from GitHub to IRC logs, from subtitles to books. And literally less than a week ago, two researchers, Ben Wang and Aaron Komatsuzaki, released a new GPT model with 6 billion parameters, while still not on par with the largest OpenAI offerings, already a formidable alternative. Which brings us today. We need to build a better version of our Pony model. And that is still an issue. As amazing as film fiction is, data cleanup is a major problem. Different formatting, different ways of structuring dialogues, wrong tags, etc. None of the work to improve this dataset requires specific AI or machine learning knowledge, and yet exceptionally important to the task of building new Pony text prediction model. So if you want to help with that, just keep following the PPP thread. Also, GPT provides rich control for text generation. We know some things that work, but the only real way to learn more is to experiment and try things. So again, follow the PPP threads to learn how to play with the data model and report back your findings. Okay, we've got voice, we've got text. They already provide some exciting opportunities, but can we use the power of machine learning to get something else? How about some visual? And turns out not only we can, but there are plenty of existing research we can start leveraging. In 2020, a researcher under the name Arfa released a website continuing the thread of "this X doesn't exist," specifically for pony face. If you haven't seen any of the websites like this, the gist is that they have a near endless stream of content created by AI. The AI studies a large amount of existing pictures or photos, or derpy buru in this case, and then create unique pieces of art. While the site itself is an amazing piece of technology, I personally find the fact that Arfa released their machine learning model an even more amazing deed. You see, in the last couple of years, we have seen an absolutely amazing progress in the world of StyleGAN, technology originally created by Ian Goodfellow and productionized by NVIDIA. The technology which makes all this AI-generated art possible and which Arfa used for their website. So what is a StyleGAN? Well, it's a style generative adversarial network consisting of two pieces. It's a generator producing art and a discriminator trying to detect if the art is real or generated. Evolving together in the game of cat and mouse, they eventually reach near human levels ability to generate content. And while grabbing an existing nicely drawn face would be a much simpler task than doing all of this work to use StyleGAN, and honestly will probably produce better looking results for at least now, StyleGAN has an amazing advantage. We can edit and control it, at least partially, but we're getting better at it. And that opens up so many possibilities. Custom never-seen pony variations, adding emotion and changing faces how we desire. We may even be able to turn real people into ponies.
Be who you are and say what you feel, because those who mind don't matter, and those who matter don't mind.
And yet, this is just the first step, because StyleGAN, while capable of doing some animations, is nowhere near real time. But we're also lucky that many other companies are looking into the same problem. For example, we can take the work done by Adobe and apply it to our pony faces, getting some decent lip sync, basically for free.
Be who you are and say what you feel, because those who mind don't matter, and those who matter don't mind.
Except the fact that we have another issue. Human faces are, for the most part, a solved problem. After all, despite all of our differences, we all look kind of the same. Much harder with ponies, though. Cartoon faces are a problem. Differences in drawing styles make it exceptionally hard. The proportions are very different from what you would expect. Just look at those giant eyes. So we have to quickly rewind all the machine learning research on human faces, but in even harder way. Which brings us back to the same favorite topic. We need your help, and there are many ways to help with this. If you work on 3D models of ponies, that is an absolutely amazing way of helping to make large datasets. The 3D models provide absolute ground truth, and a way to capture facial animation, facial landmarks, add depth estimation, and face segmentation. All of these things critical in our study of pony face. But we also need to build a huge dataset of face features for already existing images. And that is a lot of work. So Same as before, the PvP threads are where you want to go if you want to help. Alright, we're getting to the best part. We have text, voice, faces, lip sync. What is the end game of what we're doing? Well, as I said, my goal is end-to-end waifus, and I'm happy to present you the future.
You bet! I think it's great that humans and ponies can love each other and have a family with each other. And I think that ponies and humans can help each other with their problems. Nonsense! Humans and ponies live side by side and in harmony, and without love we live lives full of pain and sorrow. Anon, you may like ponies, but how can you be sure what they feel for you is love? Because of the way ponies live. In fact, love is so common you can't tell love apart from friendship. That's okay. I think you should find the pony for you. It is. You have a thing for me? I guess I can't be mad at you for liking me. I don't know, but you are the first person to like me like that. I have not met any pony who is interested in me like that. Yes, it is a yes.
Thank you, Astrolight. We'll be moving into the Q&A, but there's one more thing we want to do before that. Why are we giving this panel? And why are we sitting here explaining everything we do? We're doing this because we want more Anons to do what we and many others in the thread do. There's no central organization in the Pony Preservation Project. Everyone is doing whatever catches their interest and whatever they think will help. The 6 of us here are just the ones that responded to the call to put together a panel. Our contributors are a bunch of Anons with a collective desire to make our waifus real, and we want that to include you. Why, you might ask? Here's Clipper with some context.
Progress in AI is relentless, but it's mostly tech companies that are making the research usable. This is a problem when those tech companies take it upon themselves to police usage for societal implications. Astrolight mentioned OpenAI in his segment, a massive provider of AI technology for other companies. OpenAI's terms of service state, I kid you not, that users may not generate content in any way that causes societal harm, whatever that means. Of course, it could mean basically anything, and what is or is not harmful may change at any time. This is the level of ego and moral policing that we'll be stuck with if we leave AI work to professionals like this. This god-complex mentality is making its way into core AI research. NeurIPS is one of the biggest outlets for AI researchers to publish their research. They've recently told researchers that if they want to get published, they're going to have to self-censor their research for ethical and societal reasons. Microsoft had an end-to-end chatbot, the beginnings of true waifu technology. That was the Twitter bot Tay that got shut down after a poll raid, as I'm sure many of you are familiar. They decided to shut down all their Western chatbots because of political backlash. If we want a waifu technology that won't be shut down for stupid political reasons, that won't be gated by a small group of people with a god complex, and that won't act like security cameras when their owners decide to get off on how hard they're thinking of the children, then we're going to have to build it ourselves. That said, I don't doubt that we can build it ourselves, but we are going to need your help if we want to see our waifus before we're old and grey. So what exactly is it that we need you to do?
Read new research papers and discuss them in the thread. Try out any new models you can find on GitHub and other sites.
Make new datasets, build new and interesting things around AI models, figure out how to combine existing research and AI tools for inspiration. Find new ways for Anons to work together and tell us about your accomplishments.
Figure out how to make things better and show us. This project was built on mountains of love and sweat of Anons that are already put in the work. There will always be new ways to improve.
Use the tools we have to create brand new pony content and experiment with both the models and the types of content you apply them to. Content keeps current Anons motivated and gets new Anons interested. Get the use your content deserves. Also, support the AI Anons by finding the limits and shortcomings of their models and let them know where they can improve.
Help others use AI, create tools, explain things. We want the entire board to be AI capable. We want explosive productivity on all fronts. And to get there, we want everyone to be familiar with the tools and technology at their disposal.
Most importantly, make your waifu real. Whatever your area or level of expertise, there's something you can do to help. Every contribution gets us one step closer to making waifus a reality. For the last decade, you've been told that your waifu will never be real. Fuck that. Now it's time to make her real. The Pony Preservation Project contains a whole dragon's hoard worth of interesting goals and areas of research. It serves as a central location for an ever-growing pony-based dataset, voices, pictures, fanfics, even animation. How many other fandoms have anything like that? Very few, if any, can match our autism. There's also genuine AI research happening here. We've experimented with tools and techniques long before they've shown up in any research papers, and we're not restricted by any bullshit moral concerns. And since the AI researchers are so obsessed with kneecapping themselves in order to save face, the models and techniques produced as part of this project are genuinely among the best currently available to the public. On top of the AI fundamentals, we're exploring ways to make the experience as rich as possible, and we're doing it by making models work together in ways that few before have ever attempted. We're building chatbots with personalities, emotional speech, and animation, all controlled by different AI. Ones you can actually run and extend yourself without having to worry about it spying on you. Our AI research has gone on to produce various types of models for generating all sorts of new content. You've likely heard some of the very best examples in the weekly rewatch streams, and also several examples right here in this panel. I've been amazed at the creativity others have shown, and we're still nowhere near the level it could get to. And, of course, this is only a slice of what we do in the Pony Preservation Project. There are many other Anons working on more projects than we can list. Whatever you want to do, whatever your expertise, there's surely something that you can do to help. Join us, and make your waifu real. Now, that's the end of our planned material. We very much hope you enjoyed our presentation, and we'll now start taking questions from the thread. If you have a question you'd like to ask us live, reply to Twifag's anchor post in the con thread. We'll do our best to get to as many as we can in the time we have left, which, by my clock, is about half an hour. All right, let's go.
Thanks, guys. That was a wonderful panel. You guys did a wonderful job. You do great time. You do it every time, man. You're making our waifus real. Really appreciate it. So we've got a ton of questions. Let's get started. How do you guys feel about the new progress in guiding voices made literally this morning? I don't know if you guys saw this post in the thread, but I think one of you may have seen it.
Yes, I know what you're referring to, and this is something that I've wanted for ages. because you generate lines with the AI and it takes you 10, 20 attempts to get what you want, and then you have to stitch it all together. But if you can precisely control what you want, then that will massively cut down the pipeline. So yes, I'm very much interested to see how that goes.
Okay. And the thread also wants to know, how long have you guys, each of you, been in the project? How did you find it and who started it? I don't know if just a couple of you want to mention that. I think this was asked last year as well, but...
Maybe we can just go in a round. So Clipper, do you want to start?
Yeah, may as well. So I've been here pretty much right from the start. I joined at the start of the second thread, which would have been just a few weeks in. I happened to be just finishing a playthrough of RimWorld, and I was looking for something new and interesting to do. This looked new and interesting, so I joined in. That is the shortest possible way I could summarize it. So nearly 2 years now, basically.
I joined like the day or two after the season 9 episode 24, 25, and 26 leaks. I was feeling very sad, and I needed somewhere to talk to people. And that's pretty much how I discovered everything.
So I'm going in the order that we presented who we are, by the way. So I can go next. I started almost 2 years ago. So I think it was maybe 1 month short of 2 years ago. A friend linked me to the thread. Somehow I kept on missing this thread. So I started by, so when I started, I just saw what sort of stuff was going on. And I noticed that people weren't really taking some of the older approaches that worked with less data. So I started looking into that mostly for phonetics, and I just went from there. BGM, do you want to go next?
Sure. So I found the thread honestly by pure chance. I joined it in March of last year and have just been making content since then.
Oh yeah, like I said before, like I was lurking like 2 years ago, but like I haven't actually like properly joined in. Like I was like just playing around with like the old Twibot model that was come out, and I joined like probably like after like I think Cookie started doing the collab scripts. So that's why I was thinking like, I can use this. Like wow, like this is something like I can use for making like new stuff. That's quite amazing. So like I've joined like about a year ago. So that's me.
I've been interested in Pony related content generation for about a year and a half, and I started with my GPT work, but I think about a year ago, I was looking for more Pony-related AI research, and I randomly found the thread. And I think I was using the PPP models for a couple of months for internal experiments before actually starting posting in the last maybe 3 months or something.
Okay, great. Is there anyone we missed or? Okay. A few people asked this question or different versions of it, but they wanted to know whose voice was the hardest to get right.
That would probably be Pinky or Derpy, because Derpy is constantly changing her emotion, and she has 3 voice actors with a low amount of data on each one. So, good God, that's challenging to clone. And Pinky just changes her pace constantly. Even with a lot of data, Pinky just speaks way too fast.
Also, the thread was they're asking if it was possible to make an Athena voice.
Yep, so this was discussed very briefly in the streams yesterday. So one of the questions that was asked to our based Grunkle was, can you provide us some Athena voice lines? And the answer to that question is, well, if you can provide us the voice lines, then yes, there's absolutely no reason why we couldn't do it. As long as they're, reasonably good quality, decent emotion, no noise or whatever in the background. Ideally with transcripts as well. Yeah, there's no reason why it wouldn't be possible.
Okay. What do you guys think has been the best panel so far of the con, other than yours?
I was just about to say mine. Okay.
Other than Sean and other than Sermon on?
That would have to be either the first stream with Sean or the sermon one. I couldn't possibly pick between the two. There's been loads of great stuff this year.
I like just showing off the animations to Sean. That one was like just last night. I like that.
Has there been any progress with animation AI based on the leaked Flash models?
Oh, actually, pretty much all of the data we're using right now is from the leaked Flash models. So the data we're trying to extract right now is all the assets from those models. So yes, pretty much all of our data progress, right? Almost all of our data progress so far is just based on that.
And someone wants to know about prosody transfer. Is it here? Is it coming soon? Coming later? A pipe dream? Are there any particular major challenges or roadblocks for it, or is it just engineering work to just do it?
It's actually very easy to implement a lot of these prosody transfer ideas. The main problem that I see is trying to get an interface for it. At least in my case, I don't really know how to write interfaces. So if I wrote something, it would be very, very hard to interact with, I imagine.
Cookie, this is for you. How is your new model going? And they've been waiting forever and 15 keeps going down.
I have a ton of models, but I have such a low confidence with them. At this point, let me check here. I have 22 models, of which I'm let's see. I have created 12 models in the past year, and I just don't feel very confident with them. Each time I find something that I don't like about it, and I just don't feel happy to release it. There were, I think, 2 times where I was about to release it, and then 15 updates and says, oh, we've got some brand new feature or some brand new audio improvements. I don't actually know if he has audio improvements, but I feel like I don't want to post something at the same time as him, so we have overlapping kind of feedbacks. So I guess lack of confidence on my side.
So basically you have the same problem that 15 does. Like,
yeah,
I'm going to release it. Oh, wait, no, it's shit. Never mind.
I mean, I also don't have that much compute, so it has to be Colab scripts if I'm releasing stuff at the moment.
Okay, the thread was also asking if you guys are ever going to release Clipper and Cookie voices.
I'm willing
Were you
to
listening at the start?
The Clipper voice.
I tried to automate all my speaking segments, but the damn thing fucked up right at the start, so I had to do it myself. So the answer is yes, there's a Clipper model available right now on Delta's DeltaVox. You can download it, and use it right now. For everyone else here, we're planning to make the recordings all public and not just the streamed recordings. We've been recording all of our lines here. So if anyone can be bothered, you could build datasets for us and do whatever the fuck you want. I mean, my answers is basically the same as last year. Like, if you can be bothered to make a voice, then go ahead. I don't care.
And a couple people asked this in a couple different ways, but how can I be sure that this project isn't going to get shut down anytime soon? And do you think Hasbro or the voice actors will ever send a cease and desist?
Send it to who? Like, seriously, who? Who are you going to send it to? You don't know who the fuck we are. And even if you did somehow find out, the worst you could possibly do is take down the master file. And in that case, someone could just, re-upload it. So shutting any one of us down would do absolutely nothing. Also, just consider the amount of time and effort they'd have to invest into finding anyone to send a C&D to versus the amount of actual benefit they would gain. I mean, you're going to spend a shitload of time and money trying to find us, and then when you do find us, if you do find us, the impact you'll have is negligible. So it just makes no fucking sense. So honestly, I don't see any reason why it would ever get shut down.
And if for whatever reason the threads have to shut down, then I think we have enough stuff in enough places that we can reach whoever wants to. So we can throw stuff into the master doc, for example. We can put stuff in Clipper's Mega. We can put stuff in some of my Google Drive stuff, just letting people know how to find all the new stuff, and so we can keep going.
Yeah, this is something I have been thinking about a little bit, so I'll take just one extra little bit to sprinkle on my thought. So if you want to go for the pure legal route and finding some way to shut the project down, you'd probably do something along like the DMCA route, or you're trying to make it like the project, like just basically like similar fan animations that have got shut down over the years. But for me, I personally believe that this project is a damn near perfect example of fair use. Fair use being the transforming of portions of copyrighted material into new stuff, unique and distinct from the original. And this is certainly new and distinct. We're not creating anything really that you would have seen in the show. And especially on the new and distinct area, on the technical level, every single individual sample of the audio is purely synthetic. No traces of the original voice actors even exist in this generated audio. So I think there's a very strong argument to be made here that even if they wanted to try and shut this down, they'd have no legal case in the first place.
And I want to add a little bit on top of that. At least in the United States, the voices are exceptionally hard to copyright, and previous court cases, which nowhere close to AI research because nothing major happened in many years. So we don't know. Maybe there will be a court case that will change things. But based on past court cases where people were impersonating characters, just using a voice that sounds exactly like a voice of a popular character seems to be absolutely unclear, and the copyright owners cannot do anything. It becomes a little bit more harder if you try to pretend that you are that character, and this is where you can get into trouble. But as long as you are very clear that you are not trying to impersonate that character, you are not representing that character, and that you are simulating that character, the chances of you getting into problems are way less. But again, we don't know. We'll see. Maybe someone of us will get sued, and then we'll have a precedent, at least in the United States, to figure out what's going on. But so far, the government has been pretty behind the technology.
Is there anything you don't want this project to be used for?
I guess political messages that, like, just anything that where it's people just saying non-pony thing. Like, just support the fandom. Don't do things to destroy the fandom with the voices. That would be nice. But otherwise, just do whatever.
Do you think it can be possible to synthesize a voice from a 2-second clip? This individual anon needs "I love them, Lyra."
I guess he's talking about just taking 2 seconds of someone and then cloning it off of that. That is something we've already seen called real-time voice cloning, RTVC, and the results were terrible. So as far as I know, in existing research, 2 seconds is too little data.
Are the voices capable of changing the tone of their voice simultaneously?
I don't understand what he's meaning.
Yeah.
You able to explain that? I don't know.
Like changing the tones simultaneously, like in situ, like you're speaking and then while you're speaking the tone changes. That's the closest I could think. I think you're just using the wrong word there. But yeah, you had the ideas that you.
Oh, they probably mean emotions.
Precisely the pitch of the voice. Emotion. Well, yeah, Cookie had a quick fire round of ways that this could potentially be done. So maybe not as of right now, but. If you follow the thread, there's been actually quite a few posts on people creating ways of controlling and why the fuck can't I speak? And fine-tuning the output of the model. Right, I'm just going to stop talking before I fucking...
I can implement most of the prosody adjustment methods. I just don't know how to write an interface for it. The code on the back end is super simple for most of those.
Okay. The next question is, can't you hire the official voice actors to generate voice lines?
We could, but we have the lines for free, so no. That would be expensive. VAs, especially the high-end ones, are going to be quite expensive. They're probably also not going to be super happy about supplying data for something that's literally designed to take their job away, so... Maybe you can sweeten the deal with enough money, but I don't know. It's going to be rather difficult, I think. I mean, there's no reason you couldn't do it, but there's better options out there.
Yeah, I wouldn't expect those lines to be as natural than the ones where voice actors are saying things as if it were for a scene in a show with the setting. If we tell them, here, do this with this voice, then I just don't think we'll get as good data.
Okay. How instrumental to the project do you think 15 has been, and do you think other models have the potential of ever reaching his?
15's models exist, so we know for sure it's possible. So at least from the technical possibility, yes, it is possible. 15 has been very helpful in showing us that it can be done, and I think that is the number one aspect of it. So for me, one of the biggest motivators was seeing the very early voices that sounded, well, rubbish, but recognizable as the ponies they were trying to emulate. So in terms of actual technical help, he's not contributed too much, but in terms of like morale, very, very much so.
Yeah, I'll mirror that. When he first showed up, him talking about transfer learning and SV2 TTS, he basically inspired me to start reading the research papers and he inspired me to start using transfer learning instead of going from scratch. But since that point, he's done basically nothing for me. He mentioned datasets that I never got. He mentioned lending out compute that I never got. And the most that he's done for me really is fixing a couple of typos in my source code. That's pretty much it.
If the more data to train on causes problems the longer you go, how can the best data be selected to use for training?
I don't think it's actually a problem of more data causing problems. So it's a case of getting more data that's not labeled, that's introducing some confusion. So if you collect less data, there's a chance that you can have biased enough data that it's easy for the AI to learn. But if we just have better ways of labeling the data, then I don't think more data would ever be a problem.
Are any of you in the thread looking into making waifus physical through robotics, or is that still putting the cart before the horse? Ha ha ha.
Unless Astrolight is doing something I don't know.
But
I'm studying electrical engineering right now, but I really don't feel confident with it. So I could potentially be a route, but we'll see.
I've seen a few Anons talk about it, but nothing major so far.
Yeah, maybe eventually we can link up to the SweetieBot project.
SweetieBot project has shown up in the thread a couple times, as in they've posted and said, hey, we're watching, but they haven't actually interacted in any meaningful way.
Do you want eventually to make your work available to normies?
Well, we want to make it open source, so by definition, normies will have access to it.
I'm going to say normies already have access.
Yeah, we're not hiding it.
I don't know how normie you want to go, but I'm not going to write code that you could use with, .exe, but you can access everything that I've done. It's all online.
I think the main issue right now with getting Cookie's latest stuff is that we don't have a way to host the server resources and the GPUs that are necessary. So we need people to run the ngrok scripts, as we call them, so that they can use Google's resources for this. But if Cookie had a way to just host these server resources, then I think we've discussed this in the past. So it's like he would be fine with just hosting a server so anybody can use it.
I'm also out of Google Drive space. I can't upload more models without deleting old ones right now.
I'm working on a lot of related stuff for making things more accessible, and I think that's part of what I'm trying to do. I would be happy to eventually host more of Cookie's stuff. I kind of try to go for the best sounding one, and clearly I don't even have that right now because I'm using super old models, but if we can get that running, that would be great. The thing is, GPUs are really expensive, and we have an independent project which allows people host their models on their GPUs but have nice fancy UI somewhere else. So if you have a good GPU, or if you're capable of running a Colab, you should be able to start using that. Again, follow the PvP threads. There will be instructions how to participate in all of that, and you can either use someone's GPU or share your GPU. So this is coming eventually.
Did any normie beside 15 contact you about your AI work so far?
I have been contacted by so many fucking people. Most of them are idiots, but there are a couple of people that I've tried to keep contact with. Yes, outside the fandom, but to be fair, most of them are idiots, so it's been a low success rate of people outside the fandom being worth talking to.
This is a question for Astrolight. Do you think it's feasible to build a face rig live 2D face puppet for your audio to output to your end-to-end waifu program?
I'm not sure what exactly that means, but if the question is, can you use your face to live stream, then the answer is yeah, 100%. It may not be the most useful tool because there are tools that are specifically suited better for face rigging right now. And again, you're not going to benefit from things like StyleGAN much unless you want some cool pony that changes its look over stream or something. So yes, the answer is yes, we have the building pieces. It wasn't the priority, and there are better tools to do it in the meantime. So I would recommend just looking on the internet for just face-to-face live streaming tools. They will be behaving better for what you want.
Here's a question. I don't really know what it's asking, but I heard about Mum replacing Bert. Can you comment on that?
I can comment a little bit, but we don't know much yet. That's the problem. Google published very limited amount of information. From rumors, it seems to be doing things better, but it's kind of hard to say how much better. And unless Google releases their stuff, it would be impossible to really say more.
How far are we from 100% AI-generated cunnilingus that automatically do all the text, voice speech audio, and add sound effects and music in the proper places?
Aha, yes. Good question. So we do have something kind of like this in the pipeline. A few months ago, Synthbot made a tool for labeling fanfic data. So that being just labeling the characters who are speaking, the emotion you want them to speak in, and so on. And then the idea is you can take the text of that story plus the tags and feed it into, say, Cookies and Groks for it to generate an audiobook for you. That's one of very, very many ideas going around in the thread, and most of the reason why it hasn't been done yet is just because there's so many other things that we've been trying to do. So it's in the pipeline. The tools to build a data set for such thing exist right now. So how long will it be until we do it? The answer is as soon as you come and help us make data for it.
I don't think it's ever been done before, so we don't actually know how much data is going to be required to pull off something like that. So that's one of the issues, but definitely going to need help with it.
Yeah, right now we don't even know what kind of data to collect, so we have the tools, but we don't know how to use them yet.
I mean, it should be fairly simple to do. I mean, even at the very basic level, just while you're reading something on PoneAI or on the board or on FimFiction, whatever, just highlight the text as you're reading it. Just type, "This is Twilight speaking in a happy tone" for each speech line. It shouldn't be too much effort to do, hopefully. So building the dataset is easy. SFX and music will certainly be harder, but you've got, with the emotion tags, you can tell the AI generally what kind of emotion the scene is. But yeah, AI-generated music is possible, but getting it to actually control it the way you want, that's going to take a while.
Next question is, are any of you familiar with the works of K.C. Wayland?
Nope.
He's behind the new wave of audio theater for the Mind Media, and his techniques, or the techniques you guys have spoken about, reminded the Sanan of their work. And they mentioned his book, Bombs Always Beep.
Yeah, I've not heard of that, but it looks interesting. It sounds interesting. I'm certainly going to look into it.
Did you get an influx of help from the panel after last year's con in the thread? And did that help stay?
So on the animation side, at least, it's hard to tell who joined because of the con. But I think we can say pretty much for certain that H3RCM found out about this and started helping. At least started helping because of the last con, and that was extremely helpful for getting us footing in animation AI. So before, we were following an approach that almost certainly would not have worked that well, and it would have been expensive. We would have tried and failed, and maybe it would have taken a lot longer than we would have hoped. But with H3RCM's help, I think we have a pretty decent understanding of what sorts of things to tackle now and how to approach it.
Have you guys looked at the audio to face from NVIDIA before? It's similar to animation synthesis that was shown for faces. I don't know if any of you are familiar with it or want to comment on it.
I think I looked at it before, and I don't remember why it wasn't considered. Maybe because there were no source code available for it yet, or it didn't work well for cartoon faces. The problem with cartoon faces is that the way you morph them is pretty different than real human faces. The textures are very different. You have more bright colors, and a lot of research that exists cannot be directly applied. So you have to kind of play with a lot of tools and try to see if they work well. And the thing that I'm using right now is Make It Talk, actually a project, I believe, an intern from Adobe. And that project was specifically targeting cartoon faces as one of its applications. So it was much easier to get working with. And that's kind of thing. The easier is to grab existing source code and start to applying it to some of the tasks that you care, the more likely it will end up in your stack.
This one also seems to require 3D models, and we don't have a data set of Pony 3D models right now, and we don't know how to find it right now. So if anybody knows how to get like high quality 3D Pony models, that'll be something we can play around with too.
Do any of you guys have experiences with the Wilma model?
Not I.
What is one question that you never got but you always wanted to answer?
This one.
And what level of programming do you need to contribute on the AI part? Is that even possible?
I mean, from my perspective, the AI stuff is really quite simple. But yeah, I could explain the basics in I think like an hour. If you know how to write Python, I think I could get you onto that pretty quickly. But yeah.
Yeah, I think to start off, if you can clone a Git repository and get it running, then you can get started with the AI stuff.
Also, just ask in the threads. People will be happy to help you out.
Yeah, just say, hey, I want to help. What can I do?
Putting aside that you need no coding skills if you want to help with data, and then it's actually a great learning exercise where you're like, okay, I have the data. How can I start using the data? What's my first step? And again, you learn the first thing you need to go from just having data to actually using something with the data, and all the tasks around data cleanup, while sometimes seems mundane, are extremely important. Like half of the life of a real machine learning engineer is about, let's say, cropping images and turning them around the right way. And a lot of real engineers have no idea how to do it efficiently. And actually, if you just look at the GitHub repositories of people who are real computer scientists, AI engineers, you will see that sometimes it is absolutely terrifying. So I don't want to throw any shade on them because they care about other things, but the range of skills is exceptionally wide, and it seems like a big scary thing, but as long as you move in small incremental steps, you can absolutely start with no knowledge whatsoever and just a simple question, how do I make the next small step?
And I would like to say, like, all the tools I have made, like, they only took like a day or two in like actual like programming. And most of the time I was like basically just like Googling like, oh, I have problem A, how do I solve it? Oh, I use the code B for the problem A. So like, to tell the truth, like, you don't really need that much skills in programming.
How do you generate the ahs and the ohs in 15? This Anon wants to make it clear they're just asking for a friend.
Just type in ah and oh and use different emotion contextualizers and keep clicking generate until you get some good takes.
Well, my friend, to add on to that, getting stuff like that is very difficult. The AI in general struggles with very short inputs. And I got bored of having to deal with all of that, so I said fuck it and clipped out a whole bunch of stuff exactly like that directly from the show. So on the screen right now that you can see, there is a PonePaste link. In that link, there is a link to the SFX and music folder, so you can, I don't know, direct your friend to there and let him see and hear all the wonderful groans and whatever that I'm sure they'll have many nice uses for.
You can also just ask me in the thread about it, and I'll just shoot you a few of the inputs that I frequently use, depending on what exactly you're trying to get with your ahs and ohs.
Do you have many ahs and ohs in the dataset? I'm guessing that the more accurate the model becomes, the harder it will be to get those out, depending on what's in the dataset.
Would you be able to generate new voices by combining the AI similar to what this Pony Does Not Exist does with images, but with audio?
That's been a thing for ages. I don't know exactly what he's talking about. This Pony Does Not Exist, but I can probably do it.
This Pony Does Not Exist just has like a continuous latent space, and then you just pick a point from there, and you can generate an image from that. So with I think with our voices right now, we have like identifiers, but if we can throw them into some latent space, then we can do something similar.
Yeah, that should be easy enough.
Do you think it would be possible or practical to allow models to learn via Anons, opting to use some of their background processing collaboratively to continue the project that way? And would that speed things up, or would it just would the complications of it just slow it down too much?
I think that's the same question we had last year. But for training models, the time per iteration is like below 3 seconds. So synchronizing across the internet doesn't make sense. But for doing inference, where you put new text in or new blah, blah in, contributing compute would be really useful, yeah.
Is making AI models for another language hard?
I mean, if you just want to do only the other language, easy.
One difficulty would be that for English, we have Alphabet. So we have something that breaks down English sounds pretty nicely, and that's a nice way to break things down for the AI. We'd probably have to look into similar things for other languages, or just use a different, more universal language. I don't think there's a single universal language for all languages, though. So we'd have to do something quite a bit more extreme if we wanted to work with all languages. But for particular languages, maybe we can find some better intermediate representation than ARPABET and work with that.
What is your favorite style of cute mare snow pitties?
Yeah, we're collecting the data on that now, and that should be out soon, I think.
AI generated snow pitties. Oh, wow. Okay. Well, thank you all for all the hard work you put into not only this presentation, but everything you've done for the Pony Preservation Project and everything all the Anons do in that thread. It's really inspiring, and hopefully one day we'll make our waifus real.
Absolutely. So it looks like that's where we'll be wrapping it up. So we're at our time limit now, and we unfortunately can't do any more live Q&A. But if you have any more questions that we didn't have time to get to, repost them in the PPP threads and we'll answer as best we can. So thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to be here. It was a pleasure to prepare this presentation for you, and we very much appreciate your time and hope that you will learn something. If you missed any part of the panel or want to revisit it, we'll be releasing a full recording in a few days. Keep an eye on the PPP and con threads for that. But for those who don't want the ride to end just yet though, we've prepared a 30-minute compilation of some of the very best AI content from the past year, which will be played right after this on the second SciTube channel. But before we move on to that though, our new robo-overlord Twilight demanded the privilege of delivering the final message. We bid you farewell, and happy training.
This project has been fruitful, and it's only just begun. The waifu revolution is crushing, and our forces are still growing. Our sights are set on infinite content to your heart's desire. Our progress has been relentless, and continued growth is inevitable. Contribute to the project MLP. Your waifu is depending on you.
Cut. It's dead.
Yes, we did it.
We fucking did it, boys.
I didn't fuck it up too bad.
Hurley.
Oh my god.
Fuck yes.
It feels good to be done with that.
Oh my god.